I'd like to reconvene the Pennsylvania House Appropriations Committee budget hearings for the fiscal year 16-17. This morning, we have before us Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education, the Chancellor, a student, and his staff. But before we get started with the testimony, just go over a little housekeeping. I don't know why I say this, because nobody listens to me anyway. This is being televised by PCN, and you know, iPhones and iPads and all that electronic devices, you know, interferes with the telecast. I see that the testifiers have the mics as close to them as possible. These are really not that powerful mics, and it's a big room, and you need to talk into them, okay? It's also customary that we go through some morning introductions so the viewers at home and the testifiers have an understanding of how large this committee is. It also gives you an idea where the members of this committee reside. And we cover all the areas of Pennsylvania. So I'm going to start. My name is Bill Adolph. I'm the Republican chair of the House Appropriations Committee, and I reside in Springfield, Delaware County.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just an aside, that Chairman Adolph's cell phone went off the other day, and he got mad at himself, okay? So just, hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm State Representative Joe Markozik, the 25th Legislative District, which is the eastern suburbs of Allegheny County.
Hi, I'm Miriam Fox, Executive Director for the Committee Democrats.
Good morning, Representative Jim Roebuck, 188th Legislative District, Philadelphia, Democratic Chairman, House Education Committee.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Madeline Dean from Montgomery County, the 153rd.
Good morning, Mary Jo Daly, Montgomery County, the 148th District.
Good morning, Representative Donna Bullock from the 195th District in Philadelphia County.
Good morning, Leslie Acosta from Philadelphia County, 197th District.
Good morning, Maria Donatucci, 185th District. That's Philadelphia and parts of Delaware County.
Good morning, Peter Schweier, Lehigh County, 22nd Legislative District, entirely in the city of Allentown.
Good morning, Kevin Schreiber, the fighting 95th from York County.
Good morning, Stephen Kinsey, Philadelphia County, 201st Legislative District.
Good morning, Representative Karen Boback, House District 117, Luzerne, Lackawanna, and Wyoming counties.
Good morning, Dwayne Milne from Chester County.
Hi, Dave Donnelly, Republican Staff Executive Director for the committee.
Good morning, Sue Helm, 104th District of Dauphin and Lebanon County.
Good morning, Chancellor Mark Mustio, 44th District, Allegheny County.
Good morning, State Representative Gary Day from Lehigh, Berks County. Cheney University is in my district, and thank you for being here today.
Since he didn't turn the mic on, that was Gary Day. George Dunbar, Westmoreland County, 56th District.
Good morning, Fred Keller, 85th District, Union and Snyder counties.
Good morning, Kurt Sonny, 4th Legislative District, Erie County.
Good morning, Jim Marshall, 14th District, parts of Beaver and parts of Butler counties.
Good morning, Chancellor David Millard, 109th District, Columbia County, home of Bloomsburg University.
Good morning, Marguerite Quinn from the 143rd District, parts of Central and Upper Bucks County.
Warren Kampf, the 157th District, Chester and Montgomery counties.
Good morning, Keith Greiner, 43rd District, Lancaster County.
Good morning. Thanks for being here. Jeff Pyle, 60th Legislative, Armstrong, Butler, and Indiana counties.
Thank you. These hearings take so long mainly because of just the introductions. When you add the 37 members of the Appropriations Committee, you throw in a couple of the standing committee chairs, you know, we are the size of the state Senate. So you're going to hear from everybody today. And with us today also, it's my pleasure to introduce Representative Matt Baker, who's a member of the Board of Governors for PASSCUF. Also here today is Representative Bernie O'Neill and also Representative Will Tallman. And of course, it's customary that Chairman Mark Kozik and I invite the standing committee chairs, and Representative Jim Roebuck, the Democratic chair. And I'm under the impression that Representative Stan Saylor, the Republican chair, was supposed to be here. He's probably on his way, okay? So somebody's not listening to me already, so we'll try to figure out who that is. I'm going to send the Sergeant of Arms over there, okay? Chancellor, if you would begin.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I will. And I hope you'll indulge me, members. Good morning. And thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Chairman, for giving us the opportunity to be with you this morning. I'm going to save till last the introductions of my colleagues here at the table. But if you'll indulge me, just a few members of the audience who are here and important to us. We have with us today the Chairman of the Board of Governors, Chair Guido Pacchini, who is somewhere behind me. Also, we have Governor Ron Henry. Ron is also the chairman of the Finance, Administration, and Facilities Committee for the Board of Governors. We also, you heard introduce Representative Matt Baker. One of the interesting pieces of our governance structure in the Commonwealth is the fact that we have 4 seated members of the General Assembly on the Board of Governors, active members. 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, 2 members of the House, 2 members of the Senate. I have found that to be very productive and very helpful in terms of maintaining a line of communication between our system and the General Assembly. So Representative Baker is here, but also Representative Mike Hanna is a member of our board as well. Also with us in the audience today, Marcia Welsh is the president of East Stroudsburg University. She is here also to support one of her students who is seated at my right. That's not you, Mike, I'm sorry, who will be joining us today, and I'll introduce him in just a moment. Also with us today, President Jody Harpster, the president of Shippensburg University, is with us in the audience. And representing President David Soltz from Bloomsburg is Dan Knorr, who is from Bloomsburg and works at that institution. I will now go, if you will allow me, to an introduction of my colleagues at the table. Starting with my left, your right, is Lois Johnson. Lois is a longtime member of the system office and is here today to help support me and us in the event we get questions regarding statistics, data, or information that you would like to have, and quickly try to help us find that if we've got it, but also to note it if we don't, so that we can get it back to you. To my right, I already talked about, but I will introduce more formally, is President Mike Driscoll. President Driscoll is president of Indiana University, is doing an outstanding job at Indiana, and we believed because of the unique positioning of Indiana University within our system, because they are our comprehensive research university, that it would be good to have not always a president as we do, but in this particular case, this particular president, and we hope that you will use him through the course of these conversations to your advantage in terms of on-the-ground representation by a president. They are the folks who are there every day, and I think you will find him to be very helpful, as he is to our entire system, not just to Indiana University. To Mike's right, we have our student who is with us today. Drew is from East Stroudsburg University, Drew Johnson. He is a communications major, a senior at East Stroudsburg, so he'll be leaving us at the end of the year, unless we can coax him into staying and doing some graduate work, Drew. It's always a possibility. And is also student body president at East Stroudsburg University. And so we're very proud of him, his accomplishments, and again, how he represents not only the students of East Stroudsburg, but today I really believe strongly you will find he represents the over 107,000 students that we have as part of our system, and we're delighted to have him with us today. So those are the members of our group today, Mr. Chairman, and again, indulge me if you will, just a few comments, because more importantly, we want to get to your questions. Just a few thoughts. Recently, we have engaged participation with our system by a university that some know, Georgetown University. It's a well-respected and well-regarded institution. They have become very interested in what we are doing in our system to help better align the needs of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania with the degrees that we offer and the education that we provide to our 107,000 students. We're doing a great deal of work on the issue of supply-demand gap analysis, not only for us, but for the Commonwealth. What jobs are out there? Where are we oversaturated? Where are we undersubscribed? How do the degrees within our system match up with the needs of the Commonwealth now and in the future? We'll be sharing that with all of you in the months to come as that continues to unfold. But Georgetown has also looked through their Center of Education and Research at a great deal of the work that our system is currently contributing to the Commonwealth. I'll share some of that with you as the time will allow and the questions that I will respond to. But I wanted to make you aware that, because you need to know, that they did a study, and a couple of things that they cited, which I thought you might find interesting and important, are the fact that in the last 5 years, our 14 universities have increased the number of degrees that we are offering by 10%. And this exists in a day and time where enrollments have consistently been declining overall. We're down 2% again this year over last, and yet our degree production, those actually being awarded a baccalaureate degree, a master's degree, a doctoral degree, has increased at the same time by 10%. We are becoming more efficient in retaining students and helping students to graduate to that degree. We also remain a major producer in the areas such as education, business, the arts and humanities, but we've also increased the number of bachelor's degrees awarded in STEM education and healthcare fields by 37%. This is a concerted effort to try to better balance our portfolio between the humanities, other offerings, and STEM education programs as well. It is possible to do both and do both well. We are aligning our programs to meet the needs of the Commonwealth, as I mentioned, but we also want to make sure that no matter the degree, every student comes away with the ability to think critically, to communicate, to solve problems. This is what the real world of work today demands of all of the people who will go there with one of our degrees. And as I mentioned, we are working very hard on the supply-demand gap analysis. We believe that will be important not only to our system, that is something we intend to share. We think it's going to be important to the Commonwealth and the future of the Commonwealth. We're a good investment for our students. We are still the most affordable game in town in higher education in the world of baccalaureate degree, master's degree, and doctoral degree granting institutions. We are generally about $7,000 less expensive than the other brands within the state. That's not only important because it should be that way, but also Act 188, which created this system, says so. And so we take that very seriously. Access and affordability are very important to us. We have a higher percentage of Pell Grant recipients than any other higher education sector in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We are somewhere in the neighborhood of 37% of our students are on a Pell Grant, the federally funded Pell Grant program. Just so you know, another 32%, and it could include some duplication there, also receive awards from FIA. From our state grant program. We have an annual economic impact in our system based on a current economic impact study that was done of $6.7 billion to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Some of that just because we exist. Jobs, commodities, all of the things that go on, but then again, our graduates who turn over those paychecks out there in the system every single day. We have about the same funding as we had in 1997. Our state appropriation is almost identical to what it was back in 1997, but we do have 13,000 more students today than we had in 1997. Many people who hear about declining enrollment believe that we have gone below some low water mark in the past. We are still 13,000 students beyond where we were in 1997 with an appropriation that is similar to that of 1997 by age. We're now working with the Board of Governors to begin an effort, and this is really important for you to know, and I know I've had this conversation with many of you individually. All of that having been said, we also recognize things change. We must too. And we've been working very hard over the last several years to change. Some because we need to based on the economy, a great deal because we need to remain relevant and current in the higher education market around our country. We're 900 employees less today than we were 8 years ago through a variety of activities that have gotten us there. We are leaner and meaner in that regard. But having said that, as you can see, in many ways, we're more efficient in terms of our primary function, which is to graduate students with marketable degrees. We are working, however, today and into the months to come on what we're calling an operational and organizational modernization plan. What should our system, our 14 universities, our system look like for the next 25 years? They all have long and illustrious histories behind them, 125, 150, 175 years of age. That's important. But how should we organize our system for the next 25 years, which is a world vastly different, in a state that will be vastly different than it was 175 years ago? So, Mr. Chairman and members, we appreciate the opportunity to be here. We will be honest and truthful in our responses. And again, as I mentioned, Mr. Chairman, anything we don't have today that you ask and want, we will turn around a response to you as rapidly as we can. Thanks for the chance to make those remarks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chancellor. Chairman Markozik.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I do not have any specific questions, but I'd be remiss in not thanking President Driscoll a couple of years ago. They were so kind to nominate me as one of their legislative fellows and had a very nice ceremony up at IUP, and it was just made me feel very special, and I treasure that moment, and just can't tell you how impressed I was with the facilities up there, and I'm sure that's just a microcosm of your entire system. I know you have your problems, we all do, but and a lot of that will come out here with the questions, but I'll let the members, I'll give them my time to ask the questions, but I did want to say thank you for that, and it was really a proud moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Markozik. Chancellor, it's a budget hearing.
Yes, sir.
It's a budget hearing. So my first question is related to the state funding. Okay, and I'd like to hear from the Chancellor and the President of a state system school how the lack of funding affected you, okay, how you stand now as a result of the blue line of about $20.6 million. You mentioned in your opening comments your students also receive, about 32% of your students also receive FIA grants. If you have a dollar amount, that would be helpful. And for budgeting purposes, were you budgeting the extra $23 million? I want to thank the state system presidents and the schools for working with this situation with the FIA grants, okay, during this impasse. You're probably going to hear from the Democratic chair, Jim Roebuck, who is also a member of the FIA board, who I've worked hand in hand with for many years in trying to keep the FIA grant relevant in helping students receive access and affordability. So, you know, it's been tough. It's been embarrassing at times. Okay, but this is what these hearings are all about. I want to hear what you had to do when you did not receive state funding for the first semester, okay, and did not receive the 5% increase as a result of the blue line, and how'd you work out with the FIA grants?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll work backwards if that's okay and start with FIA grants. I'm glad
fine.
you said what you said. I'm incredibly proud of our 14 universities, not only their desire to meet that need during the temporary period when the FIA grants stopped, but how they went about it to make certain, first and foremost, that no student lost a FIA award by virtue of that temporary stoppage. They did an incredible job. Many took the money right out of their general operating budgets. Many took the money out of money set aside in their general operating budgets for student financial assistance. Some worked with their local foundations to make up some of that difference. And it was really, I think, heartwarming to see the creativity on the part of the universities dedicated to making sure that no student was negatively impacted as a result. We knew all along that ultimately those dollars would flow, which was helpful to us, that we were dealing with a temporary situation. But again, I think it shows the passion on the part of the people at these local universities in Pennsylvania to make that kind of commitment. So to my knowledge, and I always qualify with things like that, it's a big system, but to my knowledge, I have not been made aware of nor heard of any student that was negatively impacted on the issue of the FIA award situation during that period of time. And that says a great deal about the universities. I will also say about the FIA awards, because I wasn't born in Pennsylvania, cling to it. I know that is easy to say to people who work with FIA every day, and of course to the university folks who use it every day, but I think sometimes in states it's easy to take what you have for granted. There are states around the country that don't have anything like FIA, and therefore their students lack that direct opportunity to receive state money to help support their educational costs. None of these things are perfect, and they all can change over time. But believe me, the basic component that you have here in FIA that we have is something that we need to cherish and we need to nurture over time, especially as costs continue to grow. The second issue, Mr. Chairman, is the issue of the blue line. I've got to digress just a little bit, and I'll do it quickly. And then I'm going to turn my attention to Dr. Driscoll and let him give you an on-the-ground take from a president's standpoint on both the issue of FIA and what I'm about to say. We did our budget last October and forwarded it to the governor's office. It was a request for approximately $50 million, a little bit less than that. That was dedicated to cover the cost of inflation, health care, and pension. In order to meet those numbers and not have to ask the students or not have to ask the universities to cut their budgets, which at the time were flat and remained flat during the course of the year, we had to figure out how to absorb that some $50 million of rising costs that go up even when we are going in the other direction as far as the operation of our universities. Those costs continue to escalate. So it was really very important to us that we asked for the amount of money to at least cover that nut so that we would not have to ask the universities to make further reductions on top of the ones they were already making in their budget. There are three ways to fill that hole. One, more money from the state. Two, and it's an and/or, if you will, situation, tuition increases, and then I suppose an and/or situation, or cuts. Some facsimile thereof, depending on how the other two are measured. We ultimately, because we got to the July deadline for tuition setting by the Board of Governors, and the Board of Governors made the decision to increase tuition by 3.5%. footnote here. We have increased tuition over the past several years. 3 and 3.5 was the largest increase over the last several years. Typically, it's about 3% because we are sensitive to the impact of rising tuition on students. That total made up about $30 million during the course of the year of that $50 million deficit, leaving, obviously, do the math, $20 million. The 5% increase that we were looking at, the chairman got the number right, is just equivalent to over $20 million. It's about $21.6 million, I think, Mr. Chairman, you're right. And so you can see the combination of the student tuition increase combined with that $20 million would have enabled us to cover the deficit. With the protracted conversations and negotiations moving us well into the second half of the academic year and fiscal year, we, of course, working with the universities, made it clear that we couldn't wait to get that one figured out. Pre-Blue Line and post-Blue Line, we were running out of the ability to make those reductions in a way that would not be as huge if you wait later in the fiscal year to start making those reductions earlier in the fiscal year, whether they came in the form of freezing budgets in terms of travel or whether it had to do with not filling opened positions, whatever it happened to be. And by virtue of that fact, the universities are working hard today, hoping that there's the possibility, but knowledgeable of the fact that if that doesn't happen, we still have to cover that additional $20 million remaining in the deficit, and that's what they're working very hard to do today. So that's, I hope that answered your question, Mr. Chairman. If not, I'll take another stab, but I'd like to turn to Dr. Driscoll and get a president's perspective on both FIA and that issue.
Thank you, Chancellor, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to say that there's a historical context. So if you'll briefly allow me to mention that I looked at the amount of appropriation coming to IUP for our operating budget, and the last time it was lower than it is this year was 1992-93. So let's just recognize that there's been a challenge for some period of time. And I also have to say that I've been very appreciative by the strong support shown to reinvestment in the state system by the legislature, by the House, from whichever side of the aisle, recognizing the value of the system. And so that's a good thing, and I brag to my colleagues about that support when I'm around the country. So I thank you for that. We would like to actualize that, of course, at some point. In the last several years, since 11-12, we have eliminated slightly over 45 positions at IUP or equivalent positions permanently. We have cut about $45 million. About $32 million of that are permanent cuts. This year, we have been required to continue a practice of holding faculty positions open, using selectively temporary faculty instead of regular faculty to make sure we're meeting instructional need. And I have to also point out that between about 11-12 and now, we've gone through our record enrollment years, the highest enrollments ever at IUP. So we have been managing by cutting. We have been managing by holding positions open and not meeting the entire instructional need, perhaps at the level we would see as appropriate. This year, we have been able to manage through a budget by spending one-time dollars to fill some of the gap that was reflected because of the lack of the 5% increase in what we would have seen from that. If I look forward, we can't do that forever. I project somewhere between an $11 to $15 million shortfall in my operating budget in 16-17, which means we'll have to continue to exercise some of those cuts and, quite honestly, find ways to charge students more for the good education they receive if we don't want to erode quality. So I think that perhaps, Mr. Chairman, addresses the substance from my chair. I would mention that each of the 14 universities in the system is in a slightly different position. I'm fortunate enough to be at one of the larger institutions, which provides us with a little more flexibility than some of my colleagues have in the short term to try to manage through some of these short-term challenges, hoping for that long-term reinvestment that we would all like to see. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, you had asked for some numbers. Lois provided me those. FIA. The average FIA award for us this year is about $3,000 per student. That is a total of $85 million in that about 32,000 students in our system receive a FIA award. She also reminded me diligently that the reduction remaining is not $20 million because the cost of health care and pension is slightly larger than we projected it to be. We still have a remaining deficit of $32 million as opposed to $20 million. She's correct on that.
Okay. Thank you very much for that explanation. And like I said, many of us feel that we're confused with the governor's blue line of the 5%. We understand some of the other issues on the table, okay? But the 5%, we feel very strongly that should have went out. The money was there, but I'm sure you're going to get further questions. And I'm just going to ask, because of the length of time and the number of members that we have, if we can shorten up the answers, sure. Okay, would be great. It's my pleasure now to turn the mic over to the Democratic Chair of the House Education Committee, Representative Jim Roebuck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chancellor, in your presentation, you referenced the legislation which established the state system, and you noted both the importance of access and affordability. I want to just focus a little bit on access. One of the continuing issues in higher education in Pennsylvania relates directly to access. The state system is established by Pennsylvania tax dollars, and in fact should be based on the premise that every taxpayer should have equal access to an opportunity at higher education within the state system. Yet I think we all know that is not necessarily true. And I think any vision of building a new state college campus is probably illusionary. That's not going to happen. But what are we doing about trying to open up lines of access for every resident of Pennsylvania? Is there a vigorous distance learning program within the state system that drives out your education to every community in this Commonwealth? Is there anything that gives to all Pennsylvanians access to the excellence of the state system?
Representative, I'm going to answer that, but I want to broaden my answer, first of all, to encompass the fact that on the issue of higher education in Pennsylvania, this is an incredible state by way of access, if you consider access to be sheer volume. 350 institutions of higher education or more, most of whom offer some variation with online education, and that includes our community colleges. But access is not always counted by just available volume of offerings or institutions, because one might have 350 institutions, but if one can't get into one of those, it's a problem. I have noted in the time I've been here, which will be 3 years, not too distant future, that while we have a trifurcated system of higher education, what do I mean by that? We have our state system, we have the state-related universities, and we have the community colleges, public now I'm talking about. There still exists, I think, too many lines that separate those three institutions from the issue of access. The 14 community colleges were created with a very specific mission: open enrollment. Take students who may not otherwise rise to the level of qualification for a publicly funded state university, state-owned or state-related, give them the tools that they need, including in many cases remediation, and prepare them either then for a degree that will take them to the world of work or a degree that will launch them on to a state-related or a state-owned university to finish their baccalaureate degree and beyond. And I think one of the The issues we still have to wrestle with as a Commonwealth is the articulation between community college, state-owned and state-related. And I think that still exists today. We are working very carefully with the community colleges. It's sometimes a little difficult because they are not a system. I'm not criticizing, but they're not an organized system in the way some are around the country. And they do a great job of trying to take that differentiated approach that they have 14 times and work together with us. We're getting ready to make some announcements in the near future about some seamless opportunities for students between our community colleges and our state-owned, 14 state-owned universities. But access is one of those terms, to your good point, that is not defined easily. What might just sound like, gosh, there's 350 institutions of higher education. Anybody who wants should be able to go anywhere they want. It's not always that easy. These universities fight to maintain access relative to affordability, which even compounds the issue. How many things can you offer, and to what total demographic group can you make it available? And that gets to be an even greater struggle. It's something we wrestle with every day. Having said that, and I'll end here, be able to hopefully answer any follow-ups you have, but trying to make sure that we better articulate our community colleges, our state-owned and our state-relateds, I think is going to be imperative to the future of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, to maintain both access and affordability for those who want it and need it. And this look that our board has commissioned on modernization and reorganization for our system is going to be dedicated in large measure not only to what we need to do, but we want to even talk about what we believe we're going to have to do with those state-owned, state-relateds and community colleges to do a better job. If we do it in a silo, it will be half a loaf. We're going to have ongoing conversations with the other two providers at the same time.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Sue Helm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Chancellor Brogan and all. Appreciate you being here to answer our questions. Student debt resulting from paying for higher education is an ongoing concern nationwide. And could you give us an idea of the debt load of a typical student leaving a state system university, and also discuss what the state system is doing to try and reduce the debt burden?
Yes, Representative. Our average debt from our system with a takeaway is just about $30,000. That also includes about 79% of that where students have borrowed. So beyond FIA grants and beyond Pell grants, it also includes loans that they have borrowed privately. So our takeaway debt is $30,000. To give you some context then, which I know you think is important, as do I, the United States average is just about similar to that on a national level. But from a Pennsylvania standpoint, when you take all of the providers in Pennsylvania, the average debt load is about $33,500. So we are below the average in Pennsylvania, and we're about the same as the national average when it comes to debt load.
I hear that all the time, so it's nice to know we're below, but yet it'd be nice if we could lower it even yet. I do have one more question. Of the 14 state system universities, which of them have struggled the most with enrollment and may be the most financially vulnerable?
That's probably a twofold answer. Number one, Cheney University is struggling with enrollment. We're working very, very closely with them to try to see if we can reverse that trend and making some significant changes at the institution based on academic program alignment and business model function. But they have dropped precipitously over the years by way of enrollment. But at the same time, Mansfield University has experienced some significant enrollment decline over about a dozen years, and they also are trying to reverse that trend and adopting some new academic branding for their institution based on liberal arts offerings for the future to try to see if they can reverse that enrollment trend. But behind them, literally racked up behind them, you can go up the list to California University, to Clarion University, and multiple other universities that have seen some sort of enrollment decline. There are a variety of reasons for that. Primarily, the demographic trough that we face in the Commonwealth today, and that means just simply less students coming out of Pennsylvania high schools, not because they're there and not graduating. There are just less high school students today than there were 10 years ago. And because our universities largely serve markets, I'm generalizing to some degree, but largely serve markets, there are less students coming out of local high schools that would ordinarily have gone directly to one of our universities within their market. That's had a significant impact on many of our 14 universities because those markets have changed dramatically. There's good news. We hope to find the bottom of that demographic trough at some time in the near future. But the overriding news is the fact that it will take years for that trough to begin to turn around and come back up in Pennsylvania. It will not see an overnight fix. Second, and to be candid with you, markets are changing in general in higher education. People could typically open the doors in our system a bunch of years ago and know that they were going to be full. When the students came out of high school, when the students came across the state line, wherever they hailed from, or other markets in Pennsylvania, turn on the lights, open the doors, you were going to be looking at generally a full complement of students. That's changed dramatically. We are seeing far less students coming from out of state because of what they're doing with price changes within their states, New York, Ohio, and others. And we're also seeing people's taste change in universities. It doesn't mean good university, bad university. It simply means offerings, geographic location, cost associated. All of these things have had an impact on enrollments within our system. Primarily, Westchester still is maintaining, not only maintaining, but growing the number of students that they bring in. IUP, as the President mentioned, is still maintaining and even growing in certain areas. But the predominant number of our universities have seen some decrease in enrollment up to precipitous decrease in enrollment over the last 10 years.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Kinsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Chancellor, I know you and I have had some conversations in the past as it relates to Cheney University, and I just want to go back over some of the trends that you shared earlier. You mentioned that enrollment is pretty much down across the board at 2%. You anticipate for 2016, 2017, there's an anticipation that at least 3 of the 14 schools will continue to show a decrease in enrollment. Cheney University, I assume, is one of those universities that you're talking about that's going to continue to show a decrease in enrollment. And we've had some conversations in the past specifically about Cheney. Representative Him just asked you a specific question as it relates to the schools that are having some struggles. I know a year ago, you met with this committee and you shared some of the bold, innovative ideas that PASSCUF was looking at as it related to Cheney University. One of the ideas was, I think, a sharing or collaboration to some extent with Westchester University, my alma mater. Can you sort of update us as to how that collaboration is going, if it's still in effect, and the outcomes thus far?
Yes, sir. And just an amendment, if you'll allow me.
Sure.
We're not sure where the enrollments will be for those 3 universities yet for this next year.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, they're projecting increases, and we're
Cheney included?
Cheney included, based on a lot of the changes that we have been making. Now, are we talking explosive growth? No.
Okay.
But they are projecting some increase enrollment at Mansfield, some increase enrollment at Cheney for this next fall, based on many of the changes that they are not only making, but marketing to potential recruits coming to the university. We, of course, will get you those real numbers when they manifest themselves in the fall of this next year. I wanted to get that on the table. To the other part of your question, yes, we are continuing to work with Cheney, trying to reorganize the academic program array. And then the other side of the business model function of a university are those business functions that they carry out every day, whether it's IT or whether it is HR, those kinds of functions, in trying to marry universities together to decrease the amount of redundancy. There is no sense, in my opinion, and maybe that's crass way of putting it, but in my opinion and many, there's no sense in having 14 universities service those functions 14 times in redundant fashion. We don't have the money to do that anymore, even if it was a good idea. And so we have been strategically marrying universities together to then create consortium on purchasing issues. We do payroll, HR as a system, and we have a whole slate of other functions where we intend to bring together universities. I call it insourcing, because you're not really outsourcing to a private vendor. You're insourcing those functions to another public university where they're already performing it. They have volume and scale, and with a little additional money that you could provide through a contract, you save money. They get a little additional money to add to their complement to be able to service not only themselves, but also your institution as the sending institution. So we've been doing that not only at Cheney, Representative, we've been doing more of that across the spectrum. And we believe that will provide a futuristic approach to how we operate as a system going forward on the business side of what we do. I'll do this real quickly, but to prove a point. Financial aid is a perfect example. Most of our financial aid is federal and FIA. The rules are the same for everybody with federal financial aid and FIA awards. And yet we duplicate and replicate 14 times how we approach FIA and federal financial aid on all of our campuses. You know who doesn't know that? The students and their families. They have no idea where that's done. And so we believe if we can continue to take something like financial aid, allow the universities to continue to handle their own unique financial aid packages that they provide, but better organize the federal and state and tamp down the redundancy, the savings can be plowed back into the universities in the form of opportunities for students going forward.
So, Mr. Chancellor, with the insourcing, over the past year, has Cheney University received, and/or Westchester, can you talk about some of the positive effects that the impact that it has had? And the reason I bring this up because I know that at one point, meeting with Heaton Cheney's call, there was some concern. I used the term takeover.
Yeah.
And Chairman Roebuck and I met with the students and that faculty, well, with that group a couple of times, and sort of shared that our understanding was that it was not a takeover, but yet this insourcing will allow some positive benefits, especially to Cheney University. We recognize that Cheney University is the only historical black university as part of the Apache system. And I think that part of the concern that was also shared is that being the only historical black university, as we talk about branding, again, I went to Westchester, I visited Cheney, two distinctly different schools. So how do you still maintain the brand at Cheney University being a historical black university? How do you also, I guess, advertise to increase enrollment, without the conspicuous of it's being taken over by Westchester University, which is really a totally different cultural type school? Yes, sir.
Great question. And the answer is this. In that we are doing this all over the system, it is no more a takeover than Bloomsburg working with Mansfield. It is not to even take over their functions, it is to provide on a contract basis those functions to save the institution funds. So whether it is Westchester and Cheney, or as we've talked about, any one of our other universities who provide those services, who may provide them for Cheney, it is strictly a business move to make sure that Cheney can redirect the savings back into Cheney University, but it doesn't really change the governance structure of the way an institution operates. It really is just changing the business model approach. And by the way, this is now something that's being done all over the country as people are recognizing more and more the two halves of a university, the academic and the support services, and the fact that the support services are costing more and more over time. Folks, 80% of our budgets or thereabouts are people. We're in the people business. It's what we do. And what we find during these budget cutting experiences is you can turn off the lights more, you can turn the air conditioning down, you can turn the heat down. You can only do so much of that, and you get back to the lion's share of your cost, which are people, personnel. It's what we are. And by reducing the cost associated with providing many of those services, you can realize significant savings that can go back to the institution, and that's what it's all about.
Chancellor, and I know that we're running out of time, so very quickly, if I may, Mr. Chairman, just two quick questions, and if you could just answer these very quickly. Sure. Cheney University, I think when we met last year, had an interim president. Do they now have a permanent president, or is it still running under the interim?
So they still have an interim president.
How long does that? What's the plan in regards to getting permanency there?
We are still trying to get our arms around some of the major issues that Cheney is dealing with, so that by the time we post that job for a permanent president, we'll be as attractive as possible to the most attractive candidates. Hopefully between now and the end of the year, if we can continue to make those kinds of changes and see a return on investment by way of efficiency and effectiveness, then we can post that job and feel good about the candidates that we would get for.
Okay, my last part is really a comment. I recognize that there was a request to increase funding for the Keystone Honors. My hope is that Patchy or whoever's involved will really take a vigorous approach to advertising so that Cheney can, basically try to do an outreach to encourage students to attend the university under conspicuous of that the Keystone Honors grant is available.
Yes, sir. Our public relations folks are working with theirs. They're short-staffed. We're trying to supplement that effort in terms of marketing and recruitment.
Great. Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Representative.
Thank you. Representative Warren Kampf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chancellor, so, there are three legs to this stool, right? There's public support, taxpayer support, there's tuition, and then I think it's just operating costs. House Bill 1460, our budget bill, had a $20 million, 5% increase for you. I was pleased to see that in there and proud to vote for it. I think we're in this strange position where the governor blue-lined that, crossed that $20 million out, although now in his budget book for 16-17, he's assuming that same $20 million is going to come back in for 15-16. Little odd, contradictory situation that blue line has placed us in. That's the taxpayer support piece of this. You've talked about cost savings. You've talked about how enrollment is down. I think over the last 3 or 4 years, it's down 10,000. And based on a joint state government commission report I saw, essentially enrollment has been down over the last 10 years at every one of the universities but two. And the IFO actually came in here and told us that demographic, that student demographic, whether we like it or not, for the next decade or more is going to be flat or smaller. Specifically, what cost savings, you've referred to them generally, economies of scale and that kind of thing, what cost savings in particular are you planning on implementing? Have you implemented? And if you have any dollar figures associated with those, I'd love to hear them.
Yes, sir. And this will be a good one, too. I'm not trying to dump this on Dr. Driscoll, but I think it is important, before I'm finished, and that you do hear from someone who's an on-the-ground practitioner about how it affects IUP, because that, in some way, shape, or form, will tell you how it's affecting all of the other 13 of his colleagues. The new normal that we deal with are budget reductions. We understand that. And I got to tell you, the 14 presidents know every day when they go to work, they're probably going to have to look at everything they do and how they're organized. And I'm not talking about just marginal reductions in their budget. As I've outlined, we're looking at a $30 million reduction yet in this fiscal year, and this fiscal year is quickly ebbing away. Next year, I can tell you that even if we satisfy this one, and we have to balance our budgets, next year we're staring, based on projected growth in pension and health care, general rate of inflation, at about $41 million, which is part of our request this year for next year, for the next fiscal year. That, again, is to cover health care, pension, and general rate of inflation, those costs associated. We also are seeing rising costs in new degree creation. There's an interesting myth that exists, which is if you close a program, and we have closed many over the last several years because they're undersubscribed, under-enrolled, that there should be enough money generated by the closure to move over to open a new program in its place. The problem is by the time we've closed that program, it probably not only is not self-sufficient economically, it probably is taking money from other programs to continue to support, leaving us with an inability to more quickly add, even though we are adding a great many new programs. And again, programs largely dedicated to the future of Pennsylvania. Those programs, however, are high-cost programs. They are STEM-oriented. They have a requirement for smaller class sizes based on the content, higher cost in equipment, higher cost in facilities based on what you have to offer those programs. So there's that intricacy that goes along with trying to remain current and buoyant in the markets. But to that end, Lois, we've cut over the last several years
$300 million.
$300 million in the last
In the last 10 years.
in the last 10 years, $300 million and 900 employees over the last 10 years. And I will say $20 million to us is $1 billion to somebody else. It is not going to totally insulate any of our 14 universities by itself, but I looked at that $20 million and still do for next year as an additional investment in our system to simply help us meet the costs that we are required to bear, and also hopefully put some of that money into new ways of doing old business to assure that these students have a 21st century educational opportunity.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up, could you unpack the $300 million a little bit for me, other than staff? Are there sort of going forward cost savings, $10 million for this move, $20 million for that move, things that are making the system leaner, more efficient, tighter and better?
Give you one. I talked about some of those shared services. If you take the shared services in which we engage at the system level, HR, payroll, and some of those functions, we calculate that as about an $11 million a year savings system-wide. Those are the kinds of things we're trying to do. We will be calculating those things that I mentioned to Representative Kinsey. As we develop more of those, we want to have a baseline data so that we know how much we are saving when we put 5 universities together in the West, for example, to deal with procurement, or when we put all of our universities together to handle some other issue where there's power in the whole by way of cost. But those are the kinds of efficiencies we're doing. Another one, we recently looked at each of our 14 universities. I'll do this real fast, I promise, Mr. Chairman, but each of our universities, our faculty, full-time faculty, are required to teach 4 sections each semester. We did a survey because we also know that a faculty member can be released from that obligation for a section or 2 based on other obligations that they take on. So if you are elected the president of APSCUF at the local level, you are given one of those sections as release time. If you chair some committee at the institution, you can be given, at the discretion of the institution, release time for another section. Now, that's been going on for years, so we thought it was a good time to take a look at that and see how we were doing. We did. We received the surveys back from the universities. It was about an average of 65% of our full-time faculty were teaching 4 sections. It went all the way down to 48%, but the average was about 65%. So our presidents have been looking at that to try to see if, in fact, we are maximizing those very talented full-time professors where we want them to be more than anywhere, which is in the classroom with our students. And the reason that's an important variable is because when they are released for that period of time, many times, or more often than not, they are replaced with a temporary faculty member who receive compensation and benefits, and there's a cost associated with that at the same time. So not only do we want to keep great professors full-time with students who need them, but there is a cost differential associated with that as well. Thanks, Representative Camp.
Thank you, Chancellor.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Chancellor Brogan and colleagues. Glad to see you today. I thank you for being here. I wanted to begin my remarks by giving you a little lens through which I look at the conversation about higher education. Before I was a legislator, I taught at LaSalle University for more than 10 years. I'm also a mother and a grandmother who I think maybe my number one aim, my husband's number one aim, is to make sure our kids are educated so that they can have a happy, productive future. I want to thank you for jumping on enthusiastically on the governor's rollout of It's On Us. I'm a member of his Commission for Women, and I was proud that our governor was the first governor in the country to embrace the federal campaign, and I really appreciate the state system doing the same. To take a look at the budget picture. We were informed in our earlier hearings of that which you already know probably, and it's part of your mission. DCED Secretary said the number one issue facing Pennsylvania is a trained, educated workforce, a workforce for the future. I think it matches very much with the challenge and the opportunity in front of your system. And I take a look at that in light of the fact of you're suffering a declining demographic. I should say fewer high school students are graduating and enrolling into the higher education system. And also in light of your materials pointed out very clearly, a historic, and you mentioned it, Mr. President, historic decline over a long period of time of state support for higher education. Right now, state support, it looks like, is at about 26% tuition and fees, and the students are making up the remaining 74%. That's inverted from where this system began. If you take a look, the numbers in the graph is very, very clear. And then compound that with the budget uncertainty and the budget failure. And I, for one, am sorry that we put you in that predicament. I think government has a responsibility to predictably fund that which we're supposed to be doing. So I thought maybe I would ask you, Student Council President Drew, what did the impasse mean to you? How did you and your friends feel the effects of the budget impasse?
Well, thank you for allowing me to speak. At ESU, our students, we had to reprioritize a lot of things. We had to choose between, as far as our off-campus students are concerned, rent and paying our books. What's more important, getting a meal plan on campus, or, you know, we had to make a lot of those decisions kind of on our own, really asking one another, what are you doing, you know, and comparing our situations. I would just like to say, since I have the opportunity to, that I thank my university for providing that opportunity for us to, get our refund checks in a timely enough manner, given that, the impasse that we're in. So our universities have stood on behalf of us, in spite of, the work that's being done here in Harrisburg. But yeah, our students, we just had to really reprioritize a lot of different things. I mean, for my freshman year, I've been getting the Parent Plus loan as well as the FIA grant. So Parent Plus loan has been coming in on time for me personally, you know what I mean? So I'm good to go. But as far as my other friends who are getting simply the FIA grants, yeah, they've had to do a lot of nail biting, honestly, trying to figure out how long do I have to wait, or if at all. It hasn't been fun.
I give you a lot of credit. And you guys are smart, and I'm sorry you were put in that position, frankly. As I said, I think we as policymakers have to figure out what we're going to do, and I hope we never do this again the way we have done it. I also wanted to shift over just briefly to what you're talking about, which is with the declining demographic, and I was reading today in the New York Times, Tom Friedman talked about that accelerations in technology and globalization and climate change are demanding greater education for lifelong learners and for technical learning. So how is it that those kinds of pressures, and I do see them as opportunities as well as challenges, how is that changing what you're offering in the state system?
Yes, and I promise I am going to kick it to Dr. Driscoll on this one too, because he lives this every day. But to bear out what you were saying, as if I need to, but if you'll indulge me, along with other information, the Georgetown study showed that in Pennsylvania, 60% of the jobs in PA will require at least some post-secondary education by 2020. And that's how we're going to find the future of Pennsylvania. which means whether it's advanced vocational technical training, community colleges, universities, undergraduate, graduate degrees, certificates, online education, we have got to become as nimble and organized as possible. Nimble can be people evacuating a building on fire. But it also, in this case, has to be an organized effort, or we will lose to chaotic and frenetic pace. And we have got to. We are looking at the issue of online education, trying to discern how we can be more efficient for access and accessibility, and I know many are. We've got to look at our governance structure. We have Penn State. I love Penn State. They're an incredible institution. They're sitting there with 22 branch campuses around the state. Many of those branches are facing declining enrollment, and many of those are within the shadow of our 14 universities. There has to be a better way to build a mousetrap for this state going forward, with the communication with the community colleges and others. So I know I'm speaking outside of my lane on some of these things, but I don't know any other way to do this. It has to be a holistic look at higher ed, getting ready for the new century we've already started, much less are deeply involved with. And if you'll indulge me, I'd really like to turn it over to Dr. Driscoll.
I'd like to briefly mention a few initiatives that we're undertaking. I appreciate the question. Something we did about a year and a half ago is we reorganized and restructured to create an Office of Extended Studies, recognizing that our market for education is not just 18-year-olds coming from high school, but lifelong learning is going to be part of preparing and addressing the challenges that you cite. That organization is providing for-credit and not-for-credit learning via alternate technologies, online learning, and so on, in areas of interest to Pennsylvanians and Pennsylvania's needs. Again, very briefly. Second is that we have retargeted some of the work that our students do while they're students as part of their education to be out in the field, connected to some of the issues that are facing us. So, for example, IUP has strong history, strong program set in water quality. Our students are out testing reservoirs in western Pennsylvania to establish baseline, with funding from the Commonwealth, actually, as a research project, so that we know what's happening as we appropriately use the natural resources we've been blessed with. And then the third thing that I'll mention is that the new programs that IUP will bring forward, as is true for my colleagues, are strongly connected to the needs of the Commonwealth for workforce development. So we expect over the next 3 years to bring forward a degree in public health, an engineering degree, environmental engineering in particular, and a degree in digital security as examples of things that we know will be growing needs for the Commonwealth, and connecting those opportunities and needs with our own students, our citizens in Pennsylvania, so that they can have access to those jobs. So just very briefly.
I think that's very exciting, and I'm certain how we invest in higher education, in all education, is how we invest in our economic future. So, Drew, thank you for your answers, and thank you all. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Dwayne Milne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning again, Chancellor. First, let me just offer my admiration for you and your entire team for a tremendous mission that I think you're meeting for the entire Commonwealth in providing affordable, accessible education for our citizens. And I commend the great work that is taking place throughout the PASCUF system. I can speak a little bit because 3 of my most important constituents to me are all PASCUF graduates. My wife and both of my parents are PASCUF graduates. And in fact, my parents...
Would they be in search of graduate degrees at this time, Representative, any or all of them?
Well, do we get tuition assistance around here? But we certainly appreciate and understand from our family perspective what PASCUF does for allowing families to get upwardly mobile and pursue the American dream along the way. In fact, reflective many of our students in this PASCUF system, both of my parents actually were the first in their respective sides of the family to graduate from college, and I know that's something that's been very important for the PASCUF institutions as well. Do you have any statistics or figures in terms of first-time attendees for a family at our institutions? It's certainly part of our mission.
I'll turn to my scribe here and see if she has anything. I
have
don't
a
in
number
front of me.
for IUP.
Dr. Driscoll, well, at least
we were
IUP.
just looking at these numbers, and slightly over 30% of our students are first in their families to be in college.
And I just saw Dr. Welsh at ESU indicated they're even a little bit higher than that. Those are the kinds of numbers that you would hear at all of our universities and probably around the Commonwealth, because a major growing market for us are those first-time in college students, first-generation in college students. By the way, quick commercial message. Many of those students come with very little by way of experience nor support, largely because they come from families that never attended higher education, so they don't have that kind of an experience to pass on to their sons and daughters. I was one of those way back in the 70s. First one in my entire extended family to ever be blessed to go to a university because I wanted to be a teacher. But I can tell you, short of an attaboy and go get 'em, that was about it, because nobody knew how to organize around a university experience. And to have the people available to help that larger percentage is very important to us, because without that additional support, we'll lose many of those students, which would be a tragedy.
And in terms of setting up those students for success, and well as our universities in terms of continuing to try to attract students, certainly part of that process, as you've referenced some already, is internal reviews. And that includes, of course, looking at programs, degrees, majors, doing regular reviews about which ones are attracting students, which aren't, which might have to be eliminated, some may be put in moratorium. And you also, I want to tie it to your observation about the economic impact of PASSCUF in terms of what we contribute to the Commonwealth. Maybe you could tie those two together and talk a little bit about trying to use the internal review, the implications of the economic studies, and then being prepared to meet the employer needs of the 21st century.
Yes, sir. That's a big one, but I'll try to break it down into very small responses. First of all, internal review. That internal review is systemic. We are looking not only at what each of our universities provides by way of academic program array, and we're looking not only for those new program ideas, but which of their programs no longer can survive the market, and therefore have to be, as Representative Milne mentioned, placed into moratorium. That's an interesting phrase. It's higher educationally related, and it means set aside, so that if ever there were a time to bring it back out, you don't have to start it from scratch. But it's the same net effect. We also look at reorganizing existing programs. Because we keep a program doesn't necessarily mean it's lined up exactly with what those students have to take away for the 21st century. So we reorganize programs as well as add new programs to the mix as we move forward. We're now doing that with greater scrutiny than ever before, not only at the institution level, but also at the system level, to look for redundancy, inefficient redundancy. There's always going to be redundancy in any system of our size. It should be necessary redundancy based on geography or need, but also to look at issues of inefficiency and make sure that if degrees can't translate somehow to a job, and some are a little bit fuzzier than others. It's easy to say I have an electrical engineering degree and I want to be an electrical engineer. Boom. It's another thing to have a degree in the humanities and make the case that that has the potential to turn into a law degree and a career in the law, for example. But very important as we look at these is, how do these degrees line up with the needs of the Commonwealth moving forward? Before we are asking our Board of Governors to accept new degree offerings, or before we look at putting a program in moratorium. And again, it's not only individually, but how does it stack up on a system side? What we hope is with the new supply-demand gap analysis, we'll not only be able to look at us, we're a contributing factor in that baccalaureate degree percentage of 60% by 2020. We also have compatriots out there in the state relateds and in the private universities who are contributing factors to hopefully getting to the point where we're meeting that 60% opportunity by 2020. And for us to just look at it is a part of a whole that can't be satisfied. We have to look at this thing collectively and stare it down through our strategic plans, through our academic program array, and the way we approach getting these 107,000 students, but the hundreds of thousands of students in higher education at all levels in Pennsylvania to a great job, thus a great quality of life, but also make sure that the Commonwealth is better off as a result of that moving forward.
And just to bring it full cycle then, we were bringing in and attracting students, first generation or not. We're giving them proper supports. The state is investing as much as it can and will continue to do so moving forward. The university is making its due diligence efforts to remain relevant for offerings that are employment-based, among other stakeholders' needs. What is sort of the outcome of success? I mean, how are we looking in terms of student graduation rates compared to other sectors of higher education?
Good question. Our grad rates, and of course we use on a national level a 4-year graduation rate and a 6-year graduation rate. They vary, as you might understand. But when we look at our graduation rates for our system, I've got it here because I figured that would be a good question. Thank you, Lois. Our 4-year graduation rate for our system is 38%. That's up 3% from about 5 years ago. It doesn't sound like much of an increase in 5 years, but graduation rates are slow to move because you have to go all the way back and begin to retool, and the net effect is you're going to see slow incremental increases. So 3% in 5 years for our system is not bad, I've got to tell you. If you look at the 6-year graduation rate, we're now at 60%, which is significantly higher. But this is an important statistic. 80% of those who are in our schools graduated or are still enrolled somewhere else in search of a degree. There's a belief that if you don't count in the graduation rate, that you dropped out. That's not true. Many students, because of mobility, moved to other institutions of higher education, moved to other states and other institutions of higher education, but are still working to finish those degrees. But they didn't do it here in 4 years or 6 years. But 80% collectively are still in the hunt somewhere and have either finished with us or are still working on it somewhere else. The national level, just to hopefully give you some context, as I like to do, the 4-year graduation rate at the national level, I said ours was 38%, is 27% at the national level. The 6-year graduation rate for us, I said, was 60%, it is 40% at the national level. So while we are not where we want to be, you should never be where you want to be on a graduation rate, we go significantly farther than the national numbers.
Right, and just to close it up and related to that, certainly part of the reason for doing strategic program review is to find majors that are attracting students and hopefully getting them, of course, placed in good career paths. Do we have a sense of how the PASHI system is doing in terms of placements and employment opportunities, considerations of that nature?
IUP got a take on that?
Well, I appreciate the question because I love this number. We do a survey of our graduates, undergraduate who's received degrees shortly after they leave, about a year out. From that, if we do the statistics, and I can provide the report to everyone if they'd like it, but only about 7% of our graduates are not actively engaged in something appropriate. That may not mean that the history major has a job working as a professional historian, but they're productively employed, they're in a graduate school, they're in the military, or so on. And so that's a great number to think about in terms of what comes from a credential from one of our universities.
Thank you. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Representative.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Daley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sitting here thinking that I spent 32 years of my life working in the administration and finance area of universities in the Philadelphia area.
You've maintained your sanity very well. Congratulations.
Well, I'm now a state representative, so I'm not sure that you can actually say that. But so my thoughts about the budget are clearly over on the admin and finance side because I do understand, at least from the institutions I worked at, you know, what it's like the budget is a big deal. Universities do not like deficits. I had one once, and they were very strict with us in how we were going to clear that up, and I had to meet with the Vice Provost of Research on a monthly basis with my boss to give updates. So I really appreciate when you talk about the $32 million deficit, and I appreciate Ms. Johnson updating you on that number so that we could have a clear picture of it. I also wanted to tell you that this booklet that you have given us on the, is really terrific with a huge amount of information. Good. And I appreciate that you brought a student with you, because I think that that's, you provide the real face of who we're talking about and who universities are there to benefit. So thank you for being here. So I'm going to go to a question about, it's covered on Appendix B18, Educational and General Facilities. And so a lot of the conversation is about the operational support that the Commonwealth provides, but we also help with the building and facility needs, primarily with the Key 93 allocations from a portion of the realty transfer tax that's been in place for quite a number of years, and also with capital budget dollars. So you provided an overview of what you're seeing with the facilities need in the universities. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit to anything that you want to point out related to the deferred maintenance and what that means? Because I'm looking at the average age of your buildings, and it's like pretty old. So,
first of all, thank you for the question. It is back to what I said about FIA. First of all, cling to the Key 93 program. We're lucky to have it, and the General Assembly and the Governor continue to be wise in supporting it because, as you can attest to, we just don't have extra money that we can put into things like deferred maintenance and construction projects, and that money is critical to us. But to your very good point, Representative, and to put a number on it, you talked about the age of our facilities. As I mentioned, we're 175 years of age at many of our institutions, 150. It doesn't mean our buildings are, but we've been around a long time. And 54% or more of our facilities have not gone through an organized renovation process in the last 25 years. We do everything on triage, as you might imagine, from deferred maintenance, and oftentimes because of declining funds, we will patch a roof instead of replace a roof when you really should replace it, or you're going to pay the piper somewhere else. So we have a mounting backlog of deferred maintenance, and we really do on that score, and our presidents do a terrific job, take care of the bleeders first on the deferred maintenance issues, but it still allows for many deferred maintenance possibilities to go untended to. Key 93, during 14-15, our RNG facilities expenditures, $13 million, Key 93 on deferred maintenance, but also the universities kicked in $37 million from their own E&G budgets or their reserves on the issue of deferred maintenance. And capital appropriations spent on us was about $35 million out of a $65 million pot. It isn't that we put the rest into a Christmas Club account, but many of our projects are large enough where they have to be parsed out, and you have to have the money, but you can only do phase 1, phase 2, or whatever it is. So again, a testament to Key 93 dollars. Keep that up. That's my take on that, and if you'll indulge me, I wanted to see if Dr. Driscoll might have anything he wanted to say about deferred maintenance especially.
Well, I will repeat the thanks that Pennsylvania has invested at the level it has, and to keep doing that. We have significant challenges. My office is in a 141-year-old building that's in okay shape because it was renovated, but we have a growing backlog of deferred maintenance issues and are left with facilities that are not adequate in a high school in some cases because we're not able to keep up with the current demand and needs for instructional technology. Keeping buildings open and functioning becomes more and more expensive in these times when we can't modernize and renovate. So more would be great too, I guess.
Just as a follow-up, I mean, I listened to you talk about your emphasis on STEM studies. So do those STEM courses and programs require a higher level of maintenance or more modern buildings? Or, I mean, it seems like they may go together.
Yeah, and Mike might be a good one to field that one. But the short answer is yes.
Okay.
The next significant construction project on IUB's campus is a new sciences building to replace a building that was built in the early 60s and has been doing yeoman's work for the last 50-plus years. We cannot provide adequate power, cooling, networking, et cetera, in that building for today and tomorrow's technology. We've done a wonderful job with our alum who have been successful in speccing what we need for the future. It's a great, great project, and it will cost anywhere, just rough numbers, not on this particular project, but science engineering facilities generally want 50 to 100% higher per square foot than just a normal classroom building might do.
And to add, at East Stroudsburg University, we have a Science and Technology Center. It's our nicest, most new building on campus, as a matter of fact. So from the recruitment perspective, I was a campus tour guide and an orientation leader for 2 and 3 years, respectively. It's a great selling point, no doubt. But it is hard to sell your product called ESU when buildings, aren't as competitive as some other universities that students are looking at. So I do, just to echo their comments.
No, and I asked that thinking of my own experience of working at a major research university and in the biomedical research area. I know, wow, it's just unbelievable the progress that has been made in a lot of these areas, but also then the great need. So thank you for answering. I did want to there was one other thing. I really appreciate the fact that you emphasized the consolidation of some of the administrative functions across the universities, because I think that is really an area that you can make strides, because the administration's expensive and it's one of those kind of quiet little areas. So having been in that area, I also understand that it can cause great stress, but it can also make an impact and lead to that efficiency and economy. I was very comfortable listening to you because we must all talk the same way when we come from those places. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Keith Greiner.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Chancellor. I want to talk a little bit about tuition. We've been talking about costs, and it's a critical area. 2 areas. I'm going to start first with the non-resident tuition. And I know that you have some plans that actually lower the non-resident tuition rates in order to attract more out-of-state students in certain areas. I think you mentioned Mansfield, for instance. And however, I also noticed in your budget materials that you now have numerous flexible pricing pilots that expand on these sort of programs. And just 2 things. Could you talk a little bit about these pricing pilots and what you're trying to accomplish with them? And then also, your budget materials indicate that some of these pilots will be evaluated in a 2 or 3 year period to see where they should be expanded, ended. And my question is, have any of these evaluations taken place? And if not, when's that going to occur? And then are we going to expand these past the pilot stage? That's the first one. I'm focusing on the non-resident tuition with this question.
Understood. Yes, sir. We have made some adjustments in non-resident tuition, but not at all of our universities. Largely, we're talking about universities that are trying to increase the number of out-of-state students that they are bringing into their institution. A good example of that recently was Edinburgh, trying to draw more students from a state line that you can almost see on a clear day from Ohio and see if they could become a more attractive part. It may seem counterintuitive, and I understand that, to think that by decreasing the amount of out-of-state tuition, there will be a return on investment. But first of all, it is a marginal decrease to try to become more competitive with Ohio schools. Second, when you are able to attract that student, even at a slightly decreased tuition over the traditional out-of-state tuition, you still have a student who is taking a full load of courses and paying for them. You have a student who is in the meal plan and a student who is in resident housing paying full cost. So what you do is try to create a volume on this thing to not only recapture the amount of costs that you have decreased, but even increase over that based on the fact that you have enough students from out of state doing it to increase your enrollments at the same time. And that's become a very important part of the price pointing that you alluded to, that the Board of Governors now provides to our universities. We also margin the cost of veteran at many of our universities, where we've lowered the cost to veterans of their full cost of education to try to become a more attractive location for veterans, and that has become very successful, as well as providing them a price break to do that. But it's not always a downsize in tuition. Sometimes it's an increase, with the idea that behind STEM education, especially, the cost of that degree is significantly larger than the cost of many non-STEM programs. So therefore, can you increase or vary the cost that you pass on to the student to try to get back at least a larger share of the full cost of operating that master's degree in nursing or that specialized degree in engineering or whatever it happens to be, because without that you're going to have to take it from other programs at the university to realize true cost. So yes, we are trying to be very nimble in that regard, but to the second point you made, which is a good one, not in a ask and ye shall receive and let us know how this is working out someday, which is sort of higher education's approach typically. The Board of Governors decided to use a pilot process to this, and therefore say to a university, after they hear the case to be made for lowering out-of-state tuition, for example, what is it you hope to accomplish? What makes you believe it will have a positive impact on your institution? And will you be prepared, if we grant you 1 to 2 years of doing this, to come back to us on an annual basis and give us a review statistically of exactly how that change is impacting not only the out-of-state students, but your entire university structure, with the idea that over multiple reviews, if you see a trend downward significantly in those things, you stop the program, which is very different for higher ed. We typically ride a horse until it is down before we decide to dismount. Second is, do you need to tweak what you're doing, because it might not be having the full flower impact? And then third, is it going great and do you need to do more of it and extend the opportunity?
How close are we to evaluating those outcomes? I mean, is that something that's occurring this year, next year? Where are we at in that process?
Just some months ago, Representative, we went through the first round. We're still rather new at this, but we decided that rather than wait for a prolonged period of time, so we took all of those price points that had been approved and had at least a year under their belt, and we had some of those, and go through that first process. Governor Henry, who is behind me, is the head of that committee, Finance, Administration, and Facilities. We told the universities how we needed to do this, what information we were looking for, and what we found, probably not surprising, in the very, very early stages, we couldn't find any that seemed to be having a negative impact on the university, some that were having a marginal impact, and some that seemed to be having very early positive returns to the institution.
Well, let me follow up. My district before redistricting included Millersville University. So I still have a very good relationship with them. We met, when I say we, myself and other colleagues in my delegation met with them just in the last couple weeks. And they're looking at a pricing pilot that deals with the undergraduate tuition on a per credit basis. And I'm going to tell you, at least the preliminary data, I was very impressed with that model and the data that they showed. And I wanted to just expand on that. My understanding is I think they might be in the second year of that. I think some other schools are looking at that. Can you just expound on that? Because I saw a lot of advantages to that, particularly for people who are part-time students who need to work when they only need to carry a 12-credit load. Some people, I know the argument on the flip side is now you're you know, because you can take between 12 and 18 credits usually, the person that's paying, you know, that it's going to cost more. I mean, that's the flip side of the argument. However, from the data that I saw in the analysis, and I'm a statistics and numbers guy, I was pretty impressed with that. Can you just talk about that?
Yes, sir, as quickly as I can. First, Millersville is the first university, but not the last university, to move to what is called a cost per credit system. If you look around the country, members, probably about half the universities in the country, and that's a swag, but probably not far off, use a cost per credit approach. Maybe the universities you attended did, where you don't do an all-you-care-to-eat buffet and pay one price. It's an a la carte. You select the courses you are taking, and you pay an amount per credit for that particular course, okay? And in Millersville's case, they wanted the chance to move to that methodology and away from the one-size-fits-all, whether you take 3 credits or 9 credits or whether you take 15 or 18 credits. Oftentimes, it is the part-time students who subsidize the students who are taking the larger number of credits to make up the difference. They are now, you're correct, in their second year of that. They were part of that review that we alluded to. It is meant not only to increase the real cost for students of what they're taking, but it also has the net effect of having students take a more serious look at how many credits they are taking and the need to graduate on time, lest you face the additional cost of lingering at a university. Some people don't like that idea. They believe that grazing in the vineyard of higher education for a prolonged period of time is the way to go. This does not discontinue that, but students have a better awareness of how many credits they need, which is generally 120 credits to a baccalaureate degree, the cost to get there, and the time necessary to start it and finish it so they can move on to other things. And those are the kinds of things we're beginning to see at Millersville. But we do, to end, have a number of universities that have asked for the ability to do that and are preparing to implement that for the fall of this next year in some cases.
I'm just going to say I appreciate your thinking outside the box there. I think it's important. I think it's something we need to continue to evaluate, and I do want to encourage, too, that you continue to keep costs in line. I may have another question if there's a follow-up concerning that, but thank you for being here today, and thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Bullock.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Chancellor, and good morning to the rest of the members of the panel. I've been asking all the secretaries and department heads questions about our employment and opportunities within our state government. Before I ask you that question, I'd like to preference my questioning with a few comments. Some have questioned why I asked these questions. What were my motives? Let me be clear. When I ask about diversity and I'm asking about our workforce, I am asking about the recruitment, hiring, development, and promotion of qualified women and minority candidates. What I know to be true is that there's a lot of talent in our Commonwealth, but often the opportunity is not presented, and often that talent chooses to go elsewhere. What I also know is that our universities are doing a great job in educating our future chancellors, our future department secretaries, and future employees. But let me also be clear that our diverse workforce is not only beneficial to the worker, but also to our agencies, and also to our Commonwealth and everyone else that we serve. And let me be clear that even though we have made some strong strides, a history of discrimination has resulted in a workforce that is not reflective of our Commonwealth population. Even with the answers that I have received over the last few days, we have a far way to go. We have reported numbers with far less percentages that reflect our Commonwealth's women and minority populations. Several of our department heads have shared that they are the first Latina, the first woman, the first African American in a position. It is 2016, and we should be far beyond announcing our first. The fact is this: women make up more than 50% of our Commonwealth population. 50%. Minorities are exceeding 20% of our Commonwealth population. They are the taxpayers. They are the consumers of the state services we provide. And they should be reflected in all of the opportunities that we make available and fund with state tax dollars. Whether we are trying to make America great again or make it whole, I know this: the Commonwealth must be an example. It must be a model employer that includes all of its residents. And with that being said, I'll step off my soapbox for a moment and simply ask you those questions. Can you share with me your department and our institution's commitment to diversity in its workforce and other opportunities, and what do our numbers look like? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Two-part answer. First are the numbers. First of all, 56% of our undergraduate enrollment are female students. Second, we mirror on the African American and Hispanic front the population of Pennsylvania, just to give you a benchmark in terms of where we are. The broader answer has to do with diversity. It is not something you fix by getting to a number. Numbers come and numbers go. They ebb and flow. But I can tell you, and if you will allow me, I want to turn to these two because I think they're very important in this answer. Our universities work on the issue of diversity, and diversity is not just color, it is not just gender. I'm a throwback. In 1971, I went to a university as a first-time ever student, as I told you, in higher education. I helped their diversity pool because in those days there weren't a lot of me around. It was still, even then, maybe some of you faced this, a fairly elite world, and first-time in college students were sort of a new phenomena. Now, with the explosion and the change, they are no longer a phenomena. They are a major part of who we serve, but still require special approaches based on their backgrounds and their experiences, and you cannot just simply quantify that with a number. So very important to us every single day, but I will, if you'll allow me, turn to my two colleagues and see if they'd like to address the issue.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. I would mention just a couple of things to enhance what the Chancellor has said, and would turn to Drew if he has any comments at that point. First, the state system has a in-place system of performance funding that sets targets and rewards institutions for achieving various measures of diversity. We do reasonably well at setting those or hitting those targets, but we don't do well enough. The targets aren't as aggressive as you might like to see, if I understand you correctly, and we need to continue to move in that direction in the face of challenges to meeting the demand. And let me just mention two of those for faculty hires in particular. One of those is that many of our institutions are in rural locations that are not as diverse as the urban locations in the Commonwealth. That makes it very difficult for a potential faculty member to choose us over another location, which may include more people that they see as like them. And that presents a continual challenge for us, and we hear that from those in our search pools. The second thing, quite honestly, is that it's a very competitive market for faculty members of color in particular. We have a collective bargaining agreement that provides very little flexibility in starting salaries for new faculty hires, that doesn't allow us to address market considerations very well. And that makes us less likely to be able to bid effectively on some of those great candidates. Internally, we're doing a lot of work right now to make sure that our search committees are not screening candidates out because they aren't exactly the same as the person they're replacing on a retirement and so on. We're doing a lot of work there. If you don't have candidates in the pool, those other things I mentioned don't really matter. And so those are just a few things I would add to what the Chancellor said. I think we all agree that with your statement that we want to have a representative student population, a representative employee population, but there are some challenges, particularly in that area of faculty, as we try to move ahead. We're doing good work, making progress, but we're not done yet.
Thank you.
I come from a system before this one where when you wanted to go out and hire a chemistry professor, you could go out and look for the best chemistry professor in the country and be able to decide how much you were able to pay that particular potential chemistry professor for their experience and their qualifications. We don't do that here. We can't do that here. We have to we're pretty stuck to a schedule, and it does make it hard to vie competitively against all the others in state and across the country for some of the best of the best. It's a very difficult challenge to face when you're trying to get the highest quality faculty that you possibly can.
And to be able to add to that point, East Stroudsburg University has the highest percentage of student diversity in the state of PA. Well, in the Commonwealth, excuse me, with numbers between 34 and 37%, I believe. Diversity, as we know, doesn't just mean, color. That's sexual orientation, that's religion, that's disabilities, So as far as recruitment, once again, to go back to my point to another representative. In selling the university, I was a campus tour guide for 2 academic years, I was summer orientation leader for 3, and I felt a bit remiss, just to give you a bit of a history about why I'm here and why I even do my job at my school. I've been serving as the student body president for 2 academic years, and in selling the university, I realized that we sell ESU as the most diverse student population, but the governing body that represents them doesn't necessarily look like or represent them in that way. So that's the reason why I kind of ran for office in the first place, to be able to add voices to those who aren't necessarily heard. So as far as recruitment is concerned, it's heightened at my university. But as far as the retention piece, and I think that's where student leadership is so vital at the university as far as retention goes. Finally, we're bringing in so many diverse students, but now we have educated upper class students who can talk to someone about a financial aid issue that they're having or a roommate issue that they're having. We become mentors, we become big brothers, big sisters, confidants to the students who, when they're at this foreign place called East Stroudsburg in the Poconos, if I'm from the city of Philadelphia, I don't know anybody who looks like me, you know what I mean? But now, finally, I'd say in 2016, we have upper class students who can totally help them out in terms of, I don't know if that's measurable with statistics, but I do think that it's very important to.
Can I follow up, Mr. Johnson?
Yes,
Are there a significant amount of faculty and staff that was just as diverse and reflective at your school?
To be honest, I think that East Stroudsburg University could do a better job in the classroom to provide that face as a professor. But I will say that we have diversity workers who aren't people of color. One of my biggest mentors, Storm Heater, he's a professor of philosophy. He's a Jewish guy, he's a Jewish white male who does so much diversity work. He teaches many courses in Black Studies. So I don't think that, I think it's a philosophy, I think it's a mindset. I think it's inclusion. I don't think that it has to be just what you look like.
I agree.
Representative, I promise you the numbers. I left 2 out for you. 45% of our faculty are female.
Great.
Out of faculty, and 15% overall are in minority status.
Thank you. Those numbers are actually pretty good.
We're working at it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Karen Boback.
Regarding the 60% that graduate, sir, with a 6-year degree, now are there 6 years because they're staying for additional degrees, or is it because they've changed their mind and chose different majors?
I'm only grinning, Representative, because it could be different for every one of them. It could be economic. We do see students slow down their progression toward traditional graduation because they will take time off to work, to get more money as opposed to taking out loans. They will work while they're a student and therefore can't take as many credits because they're working a significant number of part-time hours in a job. It could be family circumstance. It could be, you said it, a change in major along the way and therefore the need to add additional hours in that new major that they have chosen. It could be a wide variety of issues that contribute to the extension of a student's education.
Thank you for that, because as soon as I heard that, I thought, are they students who are, again, undecided, so now they're going to incur more debt because they have to stay on campus for 2 more years? So thank you for clarifying that.
Yes.
To go on, what percentage of students becomes employed in their field of study once they graduate? Do you have those statistics overall?
I'm going to, she's going to verify, but I think it might be as close as 80%.
Over 80.
It is over 80?
It is
Over 80% of our students who graduate work in their chosen field.
Thank you. And do you have data on what your recent graduates are earning based on their field of study?
I don't.
I do not have detailed numbers down to individual field of study at the tip of my tongue. I know that our average graduate is making somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000 to $50,000, but I prefer to go back and dig out what data we might have rather than to.
And we will do that.
So.
We will do that for you.
And you'll submit to our chairman, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Last question for Mr. Johnson, if you will. Mr. Johnson, where do you plan to work after you graduate? And is your university helping you find the job?
I intend on pursuing a career in government, local government specifically. I've grown to be attached to Monroe County and East Stroudsburg. I've had the opportunity in Student Senate to meet many representatives to come, do panels for student discussions over my 4 years here. So I've shaken a lot of hands, and I'd like to be able to represent someone, definitely. My options are still open to any of you guys who need an aide or a staffer. But I'd like to pursue a career in government. And as far as my university helping me out, just being able to foster those relationships with our legislators to actually want to come and speak to students in the first place, I think has done a lot for students in majors like communication studies, history, political science, any of those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Was a relief to all us Delaware County members that you're going to stay in Monroe County. Representative Schweier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Johnson, where are you from originally?
Lansdowne, Pennsylvania.
You're from Lansdale. Okay, so you're from suburban Philadelphia.
Yep.
How do you go from suburban Philadelphia to East Stroudsburg University?
I am a
I-80.
Go for it.
Oh, I thought that was a geographic question.
It was, but sort of, yeah.
Yeah, just
Thank you, Chancellor.
to give you a little bit of reference, I'm a legacy student. So my mother graduated from Indiana University of Pennsylvania in 88 or 89. I'm not quite sure which her graduation
Don't ever
year
repeat
was.
your mother's age again.
Right. She moved to Philadelphia, married my dad, and my older brother actually got a full athletic scholarship to East Stroudsburg University. So I had been going to ESU to support his basketball games for 3 years before I actually became an actual student.
Okay.
So yeah, he was a senior when I was a freshman. It was easy as far as socially. I was pretty set. I could not go to ESU. Yeah.
Thank you. And the reason why I asked that question is because to you, Chancellor, thank you very much, sir. To you, Chancellor, and we had talked about this privately in my office, and so this shouldn't come as a surprise that I want to discuss this a little further. We had talked about, similar to your conversation with Representative Bullock, the number of minority students that you have in your system. You say it mirrors the state population roughly of African American and Latinos. That's helpful, but I'm also very curious as a first-time college student myself, or first-generation college student myself, how many of your students come from economic disadvantaged backgrounds? I heard 37% of your students are on Pell Grants. And the follow-up to that is, how many students are from economically disadvantaged school districts from the Commonwealth?
The first question, if you use Pell Grant as an indicator, and that's sort of the traditional indicator across higher education in the country, it's an imperfect science, of course, because you could make the case that people who are just on one side of that Pell Grant line are not doing much better than the people who are on the other side of it. But generally speaking, you're right. That 30 some odd percent, 36% Pell Grant award is what we use to say the students who fall into that category are statistically coming from households that are financially strapped. The second part of your question?
How many of those students are actually from economically disadvantaged school districts? And there's a very key difference between those two questions.
That's a very good question, and one I don't know the answer to.
If at some point in time, if you could share that with the chairman.
Sure.
The reason why I get to that, I represent one school district. My school district is one of the most economically disadvantaged school districts in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. About 80% of my students are free and reduced lunch. My school district is 65% Latino. About 12% Caucasian. This is the school district that I represent. I represent a young, diverse district, which is contrary to virtually every other district that you're going to have in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. In spite of the fact that I have so many young students, my three public high schools have about 1,300 seniors in their graduating class. I have 206 students in your entire system. And that is with Kutztown in Representative Day's district, just adjacent county, and East Stroudsburg, a county and a half north of us. And so I'm not 100% sure of the efforts that are being made by all of our state system schools. Incredible job of educating our students, no doubt. The product you churn out is fantastic. But when we're talking about students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, you should be on the absolute forefront, along with our community colleges and state systems, state relateds, in making sure that those students are the first ones to get a crack at your product. You had mentioned before your open enrollment with community colleges and try to streamline that. That's wonderful. East Stroudsburg has a relationship with one of our community colleges, and it's great. But more needs to be done in terms of recruiting and retention, and furthermore, trying to identify and build those relationships with those students. They need to be able to see more than just one or two educational opportunities. And so when while you go out and you find out how many of your students are from economically disadvantaged school districts, that's dramatically different than poorer kids. That finding those kids that are in a proportionately high proportion of poor folks in one community there. Trying to identify those is, again, it's going to be much harder for you to pull those poor kids out of a school district like Allentown than it would be to pull poor kids out of a suburban district who just happen to be a lower economic advantaged student.
Yes, sir. And if I might pile on, we're doing some work.
You're piling on yourself? It's a budget hearing, right?
Piling on your good,
good
comments. The College Board, we're doing some work with them on the issue of advanced placement courses and dual enrollment, because there again, if you looked at the map, I wish I had it with me today, but if you looked at the map of Pennsylvania to see where the predominant number of advanced placement courses are offered and dual enrollment opportunities, it would not at least surprise you to know that the more rural communities, the more sparsely populated communities have a disproportionately lower number of students who are able, even if they wanted to avail themselves of advanced placement coursework and dual enrollment opportunities. And this is an editorial comment, that is something not only our system needs to do something about, higher education needs to do something about in this state. We're shutting out large numbers of kids who are capable of taking an AP course or a dual enrollment course at the local community college, the local university or college. And there are a whole lot of barriers to that. I won't go into today because it's more than you want. But
sure.
That is an issue where we definitely need to make an impact. And the faster we can do that, the better off we'll be as a state.
Thank you. I'll just close, Chancellor, with I look forward to finding out again how many of your students, particularly your full-time students, are from those economically disadvantaged school districts from the Commonwealth. And as you move forward and we continue to look for ways to target those populations, any assistance that I can provide, I'm certainly happy to do so.
Get that information back to you as we find it, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative George Dunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Chancellor, guests. Good to see you again. I noticed the appropriation hearing, but I'm going to toss aside my appropriation hat and put on my other hat, that of daddy, which, as you know, Chancellor, my Princess Dunbar #3 is matriculated to Slippery Rock this year, following Princess Daughter #1, who graduated from Slippery Rock. So my concerns as a dad is, one of the hardest things we could ever do as a dad is when you leave those little girls off and shut the door and drive away. So my concern deals with safety. Representative Dean had hit on earlier about It's On Us PA, which is a program that is designed to raise awareness and prevent sexual violence. Not only just that, but all forms of campus safety. Can you give us a little bit more details how this is going, and how you're also, most importantly, how you're going to measure the results of the program?
Yes, sir. It's On Us is a national program that our state has signed on to, our system has signed on to, and it's one of many approaches that our 14 universities are utilizing to increase education, awareness, but also to redouble our efforts in terms of how we deal with the problems of sexual assaults on university and college campuses. Because as we know, it's like preparing for a natural disaster. All the preparation in the world is wonderful and necessary, but at some point when you actually have a natural disaster, you'd better be ready to deal with the aftermath of that. And half a loaf is not good enough. And so part of this program, It's on Us, is that all of us are responsible for the atmosphere on our campuses, for the educational opportunity, the awareness opportunities, and aftermath opportunities that we need to make available if and when that becomes necessary. These are cultural issues that we're not only dealing with as a microcosm of society in the country, it is prevalent all across the country and not just in higher ed. I'm mortified at the numbers that I see coming out of high schools and middle schools around our country. That was a big point made during the It's on Us presentation, that it is not just a responsibility of colleges, universities, and community colleges. It's bringing together those sectors with K through 12, pre-K through 12 education in dealing with this issue. I'll make a statement that will sound perhaps a bit glib, but I believe this. Students who walk on to the East Stroudsburg campus don't suddenly become sexual predators. Anytime a student is engaged in these activities, it's largely based on issues they bring with them when they come. And that starts very early on in a child's life. And we have, as a nation, we need to begin to address this holistically and recognize that that tragedy that occurs at a university, which creates a victim and a perpetrator, didn't start there. It got its terrible roots well in front of that, and that's a big part of what we're doing at our universities. And Representative, I'd like Dr. Driscoll, because they're just one great example of dealing with this national issue, if you will indulge the opportunity to address that as well.
Thank you. And I'll just mention a few things. I'm proud of what the folks on my campus have been doing for a long time to address the concerns that you raise. We have done a number of things related to education, support for those that are victims, and measuring the results. And so let me just highlight that from 2004 to 2012, we received a total of about $650,000 from the Department of Justice to build programs related to those aspects of the situation, well before some of the current noise has arisen about this important issue. And so we have some things in place, including partnerships with agencies in our community, so that if someone comes forward as a victim of sexual violence, they can find support. They can be told, they can be handed to the right sort of support as they go forward. But in more recent times, as we've built on that funding and that experience, we have undertaken significant training activities. And so every year, every one of our employees goes through training related to recognizing, responding to, education about what sexual harassment, sexual violence may be. I'm incredibly proud to say that all of our employees did that in this year. That I can't say that about very many things at a university, and so with great work from staff, great training, we're adding online training. We provide peer educators, so we have students talking to other students to make sure that they have a safe place, a comfortable place to talk about some challenging issues sometimes. And so a lot of activities are going on, and we're not that different from our peers in the system. All of us take these issues seriously. I do want to touch briefly on measuring the success of the results. So I can say that we're doing all of these things. Measurement is a difficult challenge here. If I receive more reports of sexual assault from last year, does that mean it's a failure? Or does that mean that I've enabled folks who have been assaulted to come forward? And so a pretty typical approach that's being standardized across the country is to administer an anonymous survey to allow people to answer freely about their experiences. We are implementing the first survey focused just on that in April. We have some questions that have been on other surveys we've done, but we're going to try to do that annually as well to see what the real incidence is as best we can estimate. Again, do people not report Well, that would perhaps seem good because there were no sexual assaults, but of course that's not a realistic picture. So I could go on, but that's probably
And
more than-
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, sir.
You want to tell me about East Stroudsburg? Do you feel comfortable there?
Yes.
You're somebody's prince. I have a lot of princesses. You're somebody's prince. but,
Somebody's
Yeah.
prince.
Yeah, I mean, from President Driscoll's perspective, we have a lot of training programs for specifically student workers. We have our alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs department. Those are peer educators who come. They have their mandatory sessions with athletic teams on campus. So anytime that you have direct access to other people, more than likely, or when you are a student under a microscope or a highlight, you definitely are given training opportunities. Many of us go through Title IX trainings and Clery trainings, and we're very knowledgeable of campus resources too. The campus tour guide is going to say, we have emergency blue light call box systems on campus. When you're standing at one, you can see two others. So if at any point you feel uncomfortable, press the button. Even if you're just uncomfortable, you don't have to actually be in a system or a circumstance of danger to press the button. You're not going to get in trouble for doing it, just so long as you're not pranking and, being immature. So yeah, we have those emergency call boxes on campus. Also, we have text messaging alert systems too. You have to opt in through esu.edu, but in doing so, you're getting alerts from snow cancellations to possible circumstances that concern safety on campus as well. So yeah, I think from my perspective, my university does a wonderful job in terms of safety.
And I'll end on that one, Representative, by saying this, because this is a hot topic in higher education. You know that as a dad. Safety. We match our crime statistics because we're very much like small cities or boroughs. We match our crime statistics up against the crime statistics of the local governments in which we're located, and we are better almost across the board at our universities than the local areas. Doesn't mean their crime statistics are significant. It just means we work to try to make sure that our crime statistics, because we try to suppress criminal activity, are always lower than the surrounding areas we're in. Safety is of paramount import.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Maria Donatucci.
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome. A lot of discussion has already centered around the job market and marketable degrees. So I have to say a lot of my questions have already been answered about the new trends and the new study programs. I'm surprised to hear that 80% of graduates are in their fields, because I know so many college graduates who are working in retail or in jobs unrelated to their study. Having said that, and since a lot of students are now in college for more than 4 years, will we see any trends leaning toward 5-year work-study programs where students can spend a year working in an internship, and many times it results in job placement upon graduation?
Yes, ma'am. We are refocusing our energy on the issue of internship. My presidents know, we talk about this all the time. I'm fond of saying that I want to see the day, not would like to see the day, want to see the day when every undergraduate student who walks that stage and receives a diploma has also, beyond the great skill set that our faculty has helped them acquire during that time, had some sort of an internship program to take along for the ride. Not only because it's a great opportunity, as you know, for a student to practice what we preach at our universities, but it's also a unique approach to giving students a look to see if you might hire them yourself as that employer while they're spending that internship time with you. One of the things we need to do to make that happen, we have 100,000 undergraduate students, we need to redefine internship program. It could be everything from a year internship program, or it might be a month-long experience over the course of the Christmas break, because it's difficult for us to get always traditional experiences. It's a little like international education. It's hard for us, if not almost impossible, for every one of our students to have a study abroad opportunity during their undergraduate experience. But if you redefine both international experience and broaden the definition and redefine and broaden the definition of some sort of an on-the-ground internship opportunity. That's what we would love to see, and that's what we're going to work to try to acquire in the years to come for all of our graduate students. It's that important.
Okay, thank you. Also, where are the growth opportunities or the opportunities for growth to accommodate the non-traditional student? I mean, I think there's like 50% of the students are now 25 or older. They've delayed their college education or their pursuit of higher degrees. Many of them have dependent children at home. They're single parents. They're looking for programs that suit their lifestyle. Do you have the resources to accommodate these changing programs, such as counselors being available on non-traditional hours, longer class days, maybe weekend classes? Can you talk about that a little?
We do have some of that, but it goes back to the issue of distance education. We need to reorganize how we provide distance education so we can become more efficient, thus be able to plow some of those dollars back into how we offer not just the academic part of online education, but the support services online that those students have to be successful and to graduate with a degree. It is very difficult to be able to provide the myriad services necessary. But I will say this. Our system no longer is looking at non-traditional students as a fascinating catch-all, because our primary customers have always been traditional, out-of-high-school enrollees. Not only with declining enrollment do we want to broaden the number of opportunities we're making available to non-traditional, whether they're community college transfers, whether they are a 35-year-old female, single with 2 children. We're recognizing more and more the importance of making those opportunities available to non-traditional students, because that's what the Commonwealth needs more of. If we're going to hit those targeted numbers for 2020, we've got to look beyond the 18-year-olds and broaden the audience of students that we're serving to include a non-traditional population. So our universities are working to retool academic programming, matriculation, recruitment offerings, counseling and advising. It's one thing to counsel a 19-year-old on how to graduate with a degree in an area. It's another thing to counsel a 35-year-old single female with 2 children. Because their hours are going to be different, because how they can rack up coursework and credits will be different than that full-time residential student. And we are retooling what we're doing to try to not only continue to meet the needs of the traditional, but the new and growing and necessary population of non-traditional students in our system. It's going to be key to our future, and I think the future of the Commonwealth.
Thank you for your answers, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Gary Day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chancellor, for being here. Appreciate, when I look up in the dictionary, thorough answers. I think your picture should be there because you're very detailed in the answers, and we appreciate that. My district, contains Kutztown University. That's why I have their tie on today.
Nice touch.
My finger contains Penn State's ring as an alumni of Penn State. And also, I have a community college in my district. So higher ed, you come to the 187th district, and we have all these choices, which is one of the things that you talk about as well in the similar area. When the legislature approved a $20 million increase in funding, and the governor vetoed that, he didn't release that money. That $20 million that the legislature approved in new funding must have put you in a tough position. I'm going to just make a comment about this so you're aware of how I feel about this situation. I think it's important that universities, both state universities and state-related universities, try their best to stay out of the political fray. And I think you do a very good job at that. And we're a team of people. We're an entire board. I think you guys do a great job of doing that. Your administrators do as well. Your students come to the Capitol, represent themselves very well, and lobby for issues that are important to them, and that's a testament to you. There seems to be here in Harrisburg an ongoing political ideology. Oppose $20 million today, and promise $30 million tomorrow. And I think it's an ideology that the majority doesn't support. That's my opinion. I believe it takes away from the overall discussion of higher ed in Pennsylvania, and I think that hurts Pennsylvania. I want to just encourage you to continue to stay in that realm of not accepting that political ideology whenever you can, and just stay away from the political side. Later today, I'll probably have similar comments for our state-related universities as well. Now, my question is about foundations. Foundations have been established for the benefit of the state system universities are working on an issue regarding public information requests of donor records. And I'm curious, I know you've had different thoughts throughout the years about foundations and maybe has evolved, and that might be my follow-up question. But in particular on this issue, if you want to say we're separate and I don't want to comment, I understand that. But if you do have a comment, do you support this effort? And if so, how would it benefit foundations and therefore the universities?
Representative, the issue of right to know and private donors, even private donors to a public endeavor, becomes very, very tricky. Having been a president, a chancellor in another system, under some different rules and regulations, I can tell you that, and having worked with donors for a long, long time, both in education and politically, oftentimes donors get very nervous about making a donation if they believe the information surrounding that donation and their name is going to become a matter of public record. It's always easy to answer, well, you shouldn't be afraid to do that because you're doing a great thing. But remember, we're not dealing with taxpayer contributions here. We're dealing with individual acts of philanthropy. Sometimes it's as simple as that individual doesn't want anybody to know that they're giving the money. They want to make it anonymous because they don't want their name attached to it, not out of shame, obviously, but because they just believe they're happy to do it that way. It is always a concern with whether or not something should be in the world of public record and public information. It has the potential to dampen, in some cases, that philanthropic effort. And I know, having been a president, it makes me nervous as a president to think of anything that would dampen those philanthropic efforts toward my university in this particular case. So you weigh it against the public good. Is it critical that the public know that that individual has donated money to support a student at that university? And what's the benefit for the public of knowing that, or can you protect that and make sure that that person's wishes, and that's what it is in many cases, are honored in that regard? I didn't know if President Driscoll, who raises money for a living as part of his job now.
And let me just jump in with a quick follow-up, and you can answer this, Mr. President, as well. But I'm trying to get to the point, it's an appropriations hearing. Does it have an impact? I'm going to be working on this going forward with the PASHE caucus, and I want to know for the Appropriations Committee, and I want them to be understand, does it have a significant financial impact? And that's where I'm trying to drive toward.
Just to the last point, let me give you a couple of numbers. Since I've been president at IUP, about 3.5 years, we have dedicated over $7 million of new funds for student financial aid. And over half of that is coming from the foundation, thanks to the generosity of donors. So just to give you an idea of scale, those are significant numbers if you talk about students trying to attend the university, keeping their debt down, and all of the things we've talked about today. The reality is, as the Chancellor says, where do you draw the line? It's very difficult, but some people wish to give anonymously to support good things, and they will not have that discussion if they think that their information is subject to the university's rules for most of the work that we do. Certainly, my foundation is not, I think, at the forefront of some efforts you may be referring to, but is very, very concerned about the privacy of those individual records they hold about individuals. Sometimes they're looking at individuals' complete financial picture when they structure gifts and things like that. So that's part of the concern.
I don't know the system exactly, but some of the fears that I would find from the balance of public need for public information. Can I donate $50,000 to your university through the foundation and then have you select quietly out of the public eye that my child can go there and use my tax-deductible foundation money to go to school? I just want to put that out there and ask that question.
So let me answer that very specifically. I believe my foundation has gone to court to prevent an individual donor from exercising that. They're very ethical about that. Okay, so I understand that concern, and we would probably not accept a gift, nor would the foundation under circumstances like that, and we would defend the appropriate scholarship process that exists across all of the scholarships that the foundation administers based on giving.
It wouldn't harm to legislate that then, if we would change the public information law to legislate that, because everybody's following it anyway?
I don't know that I can speak directly to the specifics of how you would legislate around that. It's not. I mean, that's beyond my expertise. But it seems to me that there's not a problem to be solved there, in my experience with.
And then just a quick follow-up on the process for students. The $3.5 million coming from the foundation and given to students, is that transparent of what students apply and who gets the monies or not?
And again, I'll say that the numbers I threw around were approximate. We could get you exact numbers if you'd like that. But that's made up of a number of different scholarship programs from a number of different donors and other resources. And so in each case, there's a very specific agreement about the qualifications for students that would be awarded. There's a defined review process that involves a number of individuals looking at the applicants. And so yes, but I can't say here's the one. It's many, many different processes, all of the same sort.
Thank you for your answers today. I really appreciate it. I did have a question for the student, but I'll talk to you after the hearing because we're trying to stay on time.
And Representative, thank you for your work with the Apache Caucus. We're about a year and change into the development of Apache Caucus, Chairman, where either people who graduated from one of our state universities and are General Assembly members or have one of our universities in their district have formed together in a caucus to assist us with some of the issues that we deal with. And Representative Day has been very, very involved in that. We appreciate it.
Like many of our caucuses, it is a bipartisan caucus, so everyone's invited to join. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chancellor. And to our resident student today, Mr. Johnson, congratulations, well done, and continued success, wishes and gratitude. And once you graduate in May, come to York, and we'll try to find you a job, and we want you to come over.
By the way, Representative, he didn't finish the rest of the story about his brother. His brother is now playing basketball in Europe, hubbed out of Dublin, Ireland, and is playing for that team in Dublin. So
Europe is second only to York, so I just want to throw that out there. So again, come on over when you're done. So I'll try to be brief here. I wanted to take a quick walk down memory lane. 1997 was a great year. It was a phenomenal year. Mr. Chairman, I was still in high school. I was a junior, probably looking at schools myself. The Marlins and the Bulls had each respectively won their championships. This was 4 years after the 1993 Phillies, incidentally. The pop cultural quotes of the year were, "Oh my God, they killed Kenny," and "I'm king of the world." Celebrity deaths that year were John Denver, the notorious B.I.G., Chris Farley, Princess Diana, and Pennsylvania's own Jimmy Stewart. Titanic won 11 Oscars that year. Also that year, we were fortunate to see Men in Black and Good Will Hunting. And the Spice Girls and Hanson topped the charts with Wannabe and Mbop, respectively. So 97 was a great year. But much has changed since 97. It's been 19 years since 1997, and your enrollment has changed. As you testified, you're up 13,000 in student population. Your appropriation has changed and fluctuated over those 19 years, but sadly, Today, we hear that you are back to 1997 levels of funding. And we heard from the IFO, the Independent Fiscal Office, last week that while student debt growth has slowed in Pennsylvania, we are still alarmingly third nationally in student debt load at about $32,000, a little over $32,000 per graduate with debt. Now, you've testified, Chancellor, that you are a bit under that at about $30,000, which is excellent. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit briefly about the correlation, obviously, between the state appropriation and student debt and tuition rates. And right now, it appears that we make up about a ratio of 26% 26% comes from the state, about 74% is comprised of tuition rates and other fees and things of that nature. So trying to obviously impress upon everyone here that regardless of any supplemental appropriation that we discussed today, whether it's 20 million, 5%, whatever ultimately it is, and hopefully it is more, it is still less than where you were at. It still does not fully restore the cuts that you have faced across the system. And ultimately, that still leads to you having to continue to make miracles happen or to continue to increase tuition or cut programming. If you could just try to expound on that a little bit.
First of all, there's the math. It is true, and I'm really embarrassed because one of the members had talked about this math before, and I apologize, I can't remember who it was, but had mentioned the fact that years ago, when this system was formed, it was roughly a 75% contribution by the state, 25% from the students. Well, that's changed over 30 years or more, and in large measure picked up steam with the advent of the recession. And we are now inverted, was said, and it is true. We're now at about 26% state, 25 or 75% roughly from the students. It has a special impact to our system because of Act 188 and our desire, and I would submit need, to hold down the idea of just passing it all on to the students. We can't do that. We have, generally speaking, a very fragile student population economically. We're proud of that fact because many of them come to us because we're affordable, but it also creates, in large measure, a population of students who can absorb a 9% increase, a 10% tuition increase, and in some cases double digits. They can't do that, even with Pell Grants and even with the assistance of the universities. Those kinds of tuition increases are just out of bounds. To that end, historically, we've done about 3% over the last 3 or 4 years, 3.5% this past year, and that, in large measure, is about where we try to stay. We would love to see the day and time where it was 0. But again, we still have real costs that increase, whether we are going the other direction with our budgets, and we are, or not. We still have rising costs, and I've mentioned them during the course of this morning's hearing, that we have to meet as an obligation, whether or not we raise tuition or not, that is there. So by trying to hold down tuition to the greatest degree possible, and by dealing with the declining state revenues that we face as a system, we have turned to the only thing we've got, and that is ourselves. And that's why this morning we've tried to outline many of the changes that we are making. And there's 2 reasons for it, as I mentioned. One is sheer economics, the recession, the need to become more efficient because the money isn't there, but also the obligation, as I mentioned, with taking a look at the future of this system and trying to make not only hard decisions, but visionary creations as to how this system is going to be organized for the next 25 years. We cannot and should not any longer just operate the way we've operated for the last 100 years. It not only isn't economically possible, it won't work, it also isn't the way you want to operate for students who aren't going to be living in that last 100 years. They're going to be living in the next 100 years. And so we have 2 obligations to reinvent, reorganize, and modernize our system. And that hopefully will not only bring greater efficiencies and economies of scale, but more importantly, will make sure that the Drew Johnsons of the future always receive, as one of the members mentioned earlier, the most relevant educational experience for the time in which they live, not the time in which I lived. Those days are gone. That ship has sailed. So thank you for the observation, indulging me the math, but also the passion for our system that goes along with making sure we have to do whatever we have to do to be relevant. And here, We have a variety of challenges that we face, which, coming from somewhere else, are extraordinary. I will give you contracts that were written 40 years ago, and while perhaps appropriate 40 years ago, you want to talk about have become irrelevant, but we are still saddled with many of the arcane rules, regulations, and obligations that center in those contracts. That is not a political statement. That is coming from a chief executive officer who marvels on a daily basis at what these guys have to do at the local institutional level just to open their doors and operate these universities in the best they can way to create a 21st century experience for those guys, the students that we serve. We have got to start to take a modern look at those sorts of challenges that face us, or all of the modernization efforts that we can create that surround them are not going to be nearly enough to make us relevant and competitive in the 21st century. It will not happen. We are organized in almost an early 20th century fashion. We've got to change more than just what we control. We've got to change those things that we do not currently control to make this thing become a reality. Thank you for indulging me that commercial message, but it's critical.
Thank you very much, Chancellor. I appreciate everything that you guys do within the system to meet those realities head on. It sounds like setting funding aside, which obviously is a significant piece of this discussion, sounds like there are things that the PASHE caucus can work on, hopefully to help modernize. And not to leave everyone in the room on an even more sobering or depressing note, but Drew, how old were you in 1997?
97, I was 3.
Oh, good God. All right.
So was this tie.
Keep up the great work. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Marguerite Quinn.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I told you this morning that I was going to make a promise and keep within 5 minutes. So I'll set a stopwatch here, and I appreciate any help you could do. I mean, I can't even get it. Anything you could do to help me keep this. Start. First, I want to thank you, Chancellor, for being here with your esteemed panel, and thanks for acknowledging earlier that no student lost a FIA award. There have been some mixed messaging that I've gotten from across-the-board parents and students, and it's good to hear, at least from the state system, how that was implemented. I have a couple of questions. One goes back to when Representative Camp talked about the 3 legs to the stool of taxpayer dollars, of tuition, and of cost savings. Earlier, or a couple of years ago, in Bucks County, Montgomery County, and there have been several states throughout the nation that have actually conducted an audit on a dependent eligibility audit for health care benefits. In my county of Bucks alone, which has just a small fraction of the employees that your system would have statewide, we found a couple of years ago $600,000 of cost savings going forward. Has there been an audit of that type under, in the past 10 years at least, that you're aware of?
Lois?
I know routinely, Highmark works with our universities and works with our... Sorry about that. Routinely, Highmark, our primary health care provider, does work with our employees that are in the health benefit programs to make sure that whoever is enrolled in their health care programs are eligible to be enrolled in our health care programs.
That's great to know, because what I found in some of those audits is that when Highmark or the insurance company is involved, what they're doing is auditing the claims and not necessarily the eligibility. So it's all just different types of audits. I have sent a letter to your office just with some specifics about numbers and healthcare increases, as I've done for anyone else who's come before us. So when you get that, I appreciate the reply. My other question is going to be a follow-up with regard to safety on campuses. This time yesterday, there was a group right out here in the rotunda talking about Narcan, and we heard Dr. Levine talk about this absolute epidemic. And in doing so, saying it's not cultural, it's not race, it's not economics, it's a disease that hits indiscriminately. Have you found evidence of this throughout your campuses? And if so, what do you do about it?
If I may, I'm pulling out something that my staff gave me that is a posting talking about Narcan in particular and offering training for use at our university. So
You might want to expand on what it is.
yeah, and I'm sorry, this is a drug, given my limited understanding, that allows someone who is in an opioid overdose to be saved, basically. The data that I have to the specific risk does not show for our students, as best as we can identify, a significant increase in this particular set of drug use and concern. Can I be 100% confident that we're capturing everything when I know that our communities are facing this as well? I can't
Parents
be
can't
certain.
even capture it.
I can't be certain, but we've not seen the sort of incidents that would suggest we're seeing a lot more than that. So most of our students are not engaged in this activity. Almost all of our students are not engaged with narcotics and similar drugs. I can be confident, but are we in a trend? Not sure. Drugs overall, the numbers experience we see, primary concern right now actually is a growth in marijuana use and things surrounding that. But the communities around us seem to be seeing more and more with narcotics. And so I'm telling you what I know from the numbers that I have, but it's something that we're looking at in partnership with our region to make sure that we're not missing something.
Good. I'd be curious, not from a budgetary point of view, but when, if that happens, policy with regard to what to do to that with that student. So of the 14.5% increase you're looking for in the budget, none of that is specifically dedicated towards this. You have other.
Yes, ma'am. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
I'm not going to try and spend the other 35 seconds. I'm just going to declare victory, Mr. Chairman.
I know the chairman won't hold this against you, but I did
I stopped my clock.
I did want to get on the table back to the health care issue that our board has taken a very emphatic position on costs associated with health care and recently made 2 decisions and have implemented those with those we can implement them with. Number 1, we have ended annuitant health care for all new non-represented hires in the state university system. Those are the me's, those are the hims, those are the folks who are non-represented. Now that has no immediate significant financial impact because you have to be there 20 years to qualify for an annuitant health care, but nevertheless, we believed it was important to finally end that process with those that we have the ability to do that with. Number 2, we went into our health care plan. I'll be a bit glib and tell you, it's not a Cadillac plan alone. It is a Cadillac with fins. It is an extraordinary health care plan, and stack it up against the rest of the country in higher ed, it is one of the best that I've ever seen and some of our experts have ever seen. That's a good thing, okay? And yet we know the runaway costs of health care. And so we went in and took a very careful and calculated look at some of the things that make up our health care plan via contributions from our employees, came up with a list of about 7, I think, changes that had to do with copays and the like, and altered those parts of the health care plan to increase, and I'll say potential contributions from employees, because a lot of these things depend on how you use the plan and et cetera. And we have instituted those not only for our non-represented employees, but the other unions that are considered under health care, Me Too unions, which means on health care, they will accept the same kinds of changes, in this case, that we make. We believe if that were instituted system-wide with everybody, and it has to be through the collective bargaining process in some cases, we could save as much as $12 million a year on those costs alone that could be plowed back into the system. And did it make a difference? When we started this process, we looked at universities like Pitt and Penn State and weighed our plan against theirs. Even with these changes, we are now equal to Pitt and Penn State. So we did not have to significantly negatively impact this plan for anybody, and we were very careful about what modest increases people might see and be able to absorb in that regard. But it's one of those rising cost issues where we just have no choice.
Yeah.
It's eating us alive from the inside out.
And I would, in addition to the letter that I sent with some specific numbers, I would love it if you could get a copy of what those tweaks were. But I want to make it clear, what I'm looking at is just normal slippage. You know, we found like a woman in Bucks County, her son had passed in a motorcycle accident, and through the trauma, she never took him off the rolls. So the county was paying, and, you know, there are things like that, and that it's just been, there's some statistics out there that show, especially with public sector jobs, that the slippage occurs more than it should.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Kept that under 5 minutes.
I accept some responsibility there, Mr.
Most of it. Representative Seth Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Vice Chancellor, Chancellor, President, Mr. Johnson, thank you so much for coming in today. And I didn't catch it at the beginning. Did you give your year and what your majors are?
Yeah, I'm a senior communication studies major on the public advocacy track, and I'm a minor in political science and philosophy.
Political theory. Very nice. All right. Chancellor, a colleague of mine who is no longer here, Will Tallman on the Education Committee, wanted me to ask, how many education degrees did the state system graduate in the 2014-2015 school year?
I know we have 11,000 education degree seekers in the pipeline today, and I'll see if we've got your answer to be even more specific and how many actually have graduated in the last year.
About 3,500.
About 3,500, Lois tells me, Representative.
Okay, thank you. Did Governor Wolf or his administration consult you or your office about his full veto from June 30th or the partial veto on December 29th?
In other words, did we hear from the governor's office before that took place?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Did you describe the impacts of those two actions to his office?
We went through the math in terms of what would that mean to us, similarly to what I went through with you today.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Does higher education have federal mandates as a result of any federal statutes? If so, can you name a few of them?
Wow, you don't have the time. Yes, sir. When we talk about all of the challenges and hurdles that we have to cross, you have to include the federal. We go back to just sheer reports that we do for the federal government because we receive federal funds. And I'm a big accountability buff, so I know you've got to account for the money that you spend, but we are responsible for an extraordinary number of accounting reports that go back to various strata of the federal government. It could be financial assistance. It could be on issues of Title IX, which is where issues of sexual assault are covered, et cetera. Clery Act reporting, which is a federal requirement, that requires us to transmit and communicate potential or existing acts of sexual assault in and around our campuses, et cetera. I can give you a long laundry list of those. I understand the need to report when you receive money. I've always believed that's important. You got to show where you spent it. But I will tell you the complexities of the federal government, from ADA requirements, I can go on for a long time about them, and I think it is something that the feds need to look at. Whenever I speak with members of Congress, members of the Senate, I regularly talk about the overabundance of paperwork and obligations that our universities have to get through. And it isn't even on a pro rata basis. For the amount of money we do get, and we're appreciative for every dime, the amount of reporting that goes along with it would make you think that all of our money is federal, and that's not the case. So I don't know if the president has a take on this.
Well, I just agree with everything he said. Let's do that. I have a long
This
list.
is a first, so I want to get that on the public record. Thank you.
Does any state funding go to health, safety, and well-being of students and their faculty?
Sure. I'll give you an on-the-ground example. Recently, the General Assembly passed a lot of good legislation on the protection of minors. And most people didn't think that had anything to do with higher education because, gosh, we're all adults. 300,000 visits from minor children to our campuses every year. It's remarkable. Everything from summer camps to duly enrolled students who've not yet achieved adult age, et cetera. And therefore, we then had to go in and we had to decide how we were going to deal with that. The background check issue is a good example of that. We're using our money to do background checks for all of the employees who require background checks to be done. And that comes out of, in some cases, many cases, state funding as a necessity. But we understand the necessity to do that. I come from K-12 where everybody is background checked because everybody is a minor student for the most part. In our world, it does obviously vary, and yet the idea that there might be students, again, 300,000 visits, and some of them are duly enrolled students who've matriculated, and some of them are students who just visit the campuses to see what we do. We pay for those background checks out of state money as one good example.
Okay. Based on the federal mandates, some dealing with safety, the fact that your state dollars do go to the safety and well-being of students and the faculty, has the administration discussed at all sending additional payments or supplements to the Treasurer's office or payment above his vetoed allocation?
We have not.
No, okay. Mr. Johnson, you obviously do like political science and obviously philosophy. Did you do any coursework on checks and balances of government?
To my knowledge, I don't think we did much of that. No.
None of that? No, did you take a general government class at all?
Yeah, I mean, American government.
American
yeah,
government.
Yeah,
Did you go over checks and balances, 3 branches of government?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the veto process?
Yes.
All right. Are you familiar with the veto override process?
Yes.
What's that process?
To my knowledge, if the chair exercises his ability to veto, the body that he represents at a set number, be it 2/3 or whatever, they have the power to override that veto, correct?
Yes, that's
Perfect.
correct.
Okay.
He's perfect.
Okay.
Do you know how he knows that too? Did you know your chancellor was former lieutenant governor of Florida
Good answer.
under Jeb Bush? So he knows all about executive authority.
And vetoes.
Yeah, and vetoes. Great. And Chancellor Brogan, as lieutenant governor of a former state, are you familiar with any other process for a veto override?
No, sir, other than the variance in terms of what percentage of a body it would take to override a veto.
Yeah. Have you ever heard a governor try to override his own veto?
No, I can't say I have.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No further questions.
There's a story behind that, I trust.
First of all, I want to thank the Chancellor, the President, the student, and Lois for testifying before us today. As a resident of Delaware County, I am very proud to see Drew Johnson here from Penwood. A couple of my personal friends taught at Penwood. I won't mention their names to you. It might bring back bad memories, you know. But I will certainly tell them about your progress and how you are doing so well. And fantastic answers to a very tough question. Budget hearings are tough. Okay, a lot of policy questions, and I appreciate your honesty and the willing to bring these tough decisions that you had to make over the last 6 months. 1997, Governor Ridge was the governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I was sitting probably right over there, you know, so I remember it quite well. We will continue to work in trying to get the 5% back for you, okay? I believe members will, on both sides of the aisle, agree with that 5%. Sooner or later, we're going to get together and make sure that we have, you know, the governor in agreement with us. So thank you so much for the members' information. We're going to reconvene at 1:15 with the Pennsylvania State-related University.
Mr. Chairman, before we depart, on behalf of all of us, thank you and all of the members, but in particular, you will not be seated there next year when this happens. Who knows, I may not be either, but in that regard, thank you for your service, not only to our system, but for your service to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for so many years.
It's been my pleasure, Chancellor. Thank you.
Thank you.